And she found me eventually in one of the spare bedrooms upstairs, because there was obviously we had a 4-bedroom house, and one of the bedrooms was a spare room because the kids had their own room, we had our room. And she came in, there was blood everywhere because I'd been punching myself in the face. I still got the scars on the inside of my lips where I was doing it, and she said all she could hear was stupid man, stupid man, stupid man, and I was punching myself in the face because I just felt that my presence in the life of my family poisoned them, and that they deserve better than having me in their life. And I considered suicide. I'm not going to lie, I absolutely did. I remember driving across the bridge between England and Wales one day and seeing some flowers that had been left there where somebody had thrown themselves off. It was Christmas Eve. I remember looking at this thinking, lucky bastard. And I'm glad I thought that, because it kind of gave me a bit of a wake-up call. And I thought, why am I thinking like this? You know, I've got Amanda, I've got the kids.
So at this time you were...
Oh yeah, I was with Mans, yeah. As soon as I heard that, even though I was asleep, my mind so viciously disagreed with that I woke up. I felt that I poisoned everyone around me just by being alive. I felt that every decision I must have ever made in my life was wrong, because clearly I thought I'd done the right thing, and everyone, my bosses, or my organisation, that I put so much respect in and faith in, was saying, no, of course you didn't do the right thing. You're a dangerous, crazy man that can't be allowed to carry on carrying a gun.
So it should be better with the video this time.
Yeah, because it's a little bit... I felt like a little bit drunk watching it last time.
Yeah, he can just tell how bad I am at this.
Everyone's got to learn, haven't we?
Yeah.
Everyone's got to start somewhere. So, what do you want to talk about tonight?
Well, of course, more stories.
More stories.
The last ones have been crazy. And to be honest, the more stories that you can put out there in the world that you can look back on and just...
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's not that I've had an exceptional career, it's that most cops will have these kind of stories, these kind of crazy stories of things that happened. I think probably more if you work for a smaller force, because I've always, because in the UK obviously the Metropolitan Police is the largest police force, and I don't really think they tend to kind of get involved in as many weird things, funny weird things. I mean, they most certainly get involved in serious weird things, but the funny weird things, I think, you know, generally it's the smaller forces that they tend to deal with. And of course, I was in the force at the time of an enormous amount of change. One of the biggest things I think with policing is changing the uniform. I mean, when I first joined, I told you before in one of the stories, the uniforms we had were quite traditional, but they weren't fit for purpose. You know, you always catching up with what you needed to do. So when I first joined, as I said, my intake consisted of seven women and 5 guys, and this was
your force.
That was in my force. That was the intake. When I joined the police, the intake was the 12 people that came in on my training group. Okay. Was 7 girls and
7 girls.
7 girls, 5 guys.
That's weirdly disproportionate in favor of girls. I mean, I don't have anything against it, but I mean, I wouldn't expect that.
You know, on the face of it, the answer is quite simply that of the people that were interviewed, they were the best people for the job. However, the drop-off rate for that was quite high. I think we lost two of the girls in the intake didn't even see the end of their probation. So one was because she had a gun waved at her, and she decided that it just wasn't for her. Her reaction to it was such that she decided, look, this is something I can't deal with. And as we were saying before, you know, if there are certain careers that no matter what you think you can, you know, what you think of your own character, it's only when you start doing it that you know whether you can do it or not. And there is no shame whatsoever in something like the police or the military, where when you're confronted with the reality of it, you go, this isn't for me. It's only if we've had people come into the police that are then been surprised that they would be expected to work nights. People like that, no, you should have done your homework. Nobody could possibly expect every police officer to go home at 5 o'clock. That's just ridiculous. So people like that, really, sorry, you shouldn't be in the job if you can't even understand the most basic of what it is you're expected to do. I mean, part of it obviously is a recruitment thing people like that should have been weeded out to start with. But this officer, I mean, she was involved in something. Somebody came out of a house and pointed a gun at her and her tutor constable, and it wasn't a real gun, but it's quite hard to tell the difference when they're waving it around, unless you've got a lot of experience. And it just affected her to the point where she thought, I can't do this. And so quite sensibly and quite bravely said, I'm not going to move forward with this. And so she left. The other one, I think, was involved in a road traffic collision. Yeah, she was, because I remember it quite vividly, because that was a funny story, but not a funny story. She was in a police car being driven by her tutor constable, and they had a crash. And I don't think she was badly injured, but she was injured enough for them to say, right, we're going to take you to hospital in an ambulance. And so they put her in the ambulance crashed. So it wasn't her night. And I think that was enough for her. I think she just thought, look, I'm not going to carry on with this. So, and then there was 10 of us left. And I think, I think a couple of them transferred to other forces. I know Marie did. She transferred to another force. And I know that Jill transferred to another force.
This time maybe we should be careful with the names. So
no surnames there.
Okay. Just to weed them out a little bit.
No surnames there. The names have been changed to protect the guilty. But no, I mean, the training back then was different. But the big difference, I think, is that the uniforms we wear, what we had with us, was so inadequate. When we joined, we had white shirts, these clip-on ties. We had these commando jumpers, which are these blue jumpers. We'll see the ones with the patches on the shoulder. All of our appointments, which handcuffs and things like that, are on our belt. And we had these horrible woolly trousers. But the women who joined at that time were only issued skirts. They were only issued box skirts. If they wanted to wear trousers, they had to submit a report requesting to wear trousers. It was never refused, but that was still where we were at the time, where their uniform that was issued for their recruitment was a box skirt and a handbag for them to keep their truncheon in, which was a little truncheon compared with the big truncheon that we had, the truncheon being our thing we hit people with. We went over to the ASP, which is the extending baton. Different forces at that time used different ones. We used the 24-inch extendable side baton, called an ASP, because that's the company that makes it, ASP. But our neighbouring force, for example, South Wales Police, they use a thing called a Monadnock PR-24, which is kind of what you'd see in America as a nightstick. It's a long...
Telescopic.
It's not telescopic, it's fixed. It's about that long, but it has a side handle on it.
Okay.
It's called a Monadnock PR-24. So it's 24 inches long, so it's a nightstick, so it's a long, thick piece of, it's like a polypropylene, weighted polypropylene, but it has a side handle which you hold it on. So you can swing it and do... It's actually really useful as a defensive tool, because you can have it going up your arm, so you can do that with it. Somebody's trying to hit you and then they're hitting against that, and you can then swing it out and hit them. But it's really, it's not great to have on your belt. And of course, in the end, by the time we left, our uniform was a lot more fit for purpose. We had tactical shirts. When I joined, we didn't have any body armor, didn't have any pepper spray or CS gas or anything like that. We only just had the ASPs issued to us, and everything we carried on a leather belt, which you had to buy yourself.
Really?
Yeah.
Seriously?
They issued you with kit, but it was not great. And so if you wanted, for example, your handcuffs, we use a thing called speed cuffs. So in America, you see that the handcuffs, there's a chain between the handcuffs. Ours is rigid between. It's like a fixed thing. Yeah. And the reason for that is that if we get a cuff onto a wrist, you have this bone here, it's called the pisiform bone. Yeah. And in front of that, you have a radial nerve. And we use a lot of things called pain compliance, which is a way of us being able to control somebody by being able to use something which creates small amount of instantaneous pain. So a lot of the places we would strike, they're not designed. We don't want to injure somebody, but we want them to comply with us. So if you put pain on somebody, they'll comply readily rather than trying to incapacitate them. We want them to comply with us. So once you've got the handcuff on, you always try and get the handcuff on so that the piece comes out the bottom. Mm-hmm. And then once you've done that, you can then move it forward, and that then puts pressure on that radial nerve there. And then, because what you want is people on the floor, because once they're on the floor, you can control them easier, and it's safer for everybody. It's safer for you. It's safer for them, because the last thing you want is somebody swinging punches, and then it just gets crazy and out of hand. Because then you have to escalate the force, and that's the last thing you want. You want to control somebody quite quickly, which is why sometimes things appear to be quite violent. You see a lot of these things where, for example, as you know, I was on the arm response unit, and you see people do a hard car stop, and you have people jumping out of the car saying, "Get out of the fucking car, get out of the fucking car," and you have all these people going, "Oh my God," listen to them losing control and swearing. It's a technique that we're taught. It's called shock and awe, because you want this person to be like this. Because when they're like that, they're not thinking, what can I do next? Where's my gun? What can I do next? And that gives you the opportunity to control them quickly.
It's like a sensory overload, basically.
Absolutely. And that's what you do, certainly with a handcuff. You put it on, you pull it forward, and you shout. You go, down, down, get down. And it's not that you're losing control. It's the technique you're taught, because you've got the pain compliance, you've also then got this sudden shock of this cop shouting in your face to get down. And once you're on the floor and you're controlled, we're up, everyone's talking calmly, everyone's tidy, you're controlled, you're not going to hurt yourself, you're not going to hurt me, you're not going to hurt anybody else. We can then move this into a far calmer position where we can get to the bottom of what we need to get to. But when I first joined, dogs, Snowy, stay there. But when I first joined, we didn't have any of these things. So, a story, there was a call. I worked, as you probably remember from the last time I worked, my second station was a station called Chepstow, which is right on the border with England. And just across the water was a military barracks called Beachley Barracks. And it was quite a volatile place, but you were on your own. It was like a frontier town, because your nearest help was half an hour away. So if something happened, your nearest help would have been from either the traffic department, and they could have been anywhere in the county, or from Newport or Caldecott, and you're talking about probably half an hour before anyone gets to you. So you're on your own. So it was good because, and I think that back in the day then, they tended to put people there who were a little bit older. Certainly
more experienced, I guess.
In life, I think, yeah. Just because if you're talking to somebody, say for example, you go to like a domestic incident, and you've got two people, husband and a wife, and it's flared up because they're arguing over the kids. And I've seen this happen where you have people turn up, and you've got somebody, this very young, very fresh-faced cop there trying to talk to people, and they're going, "Shut up. You're no older than the children we're arguing about. What do you know about life?" And, they don't know what this person's experience is, but you've got to be mindful of the reaction. Whereas if somebody like me turns up and I'm saying, "Guys, you need to calm down. Let's have a talk about this," they probably think, he looks old enough to understand our experience. It doesn't always work out. Well, it actually rarely works out like that, but it gave us a little bit, and of course most people were ex-military that were there, so we had a little bit more of an understanding of how to look after ourselves, and also how to talk to people rather than at people. If you remember before, I said one of the first lessons that was taught to me, which I always remembered, was only ever arrest somebody because of what they've done, not because of what you've done. My job is to de-escalate a situation wherever possible, not to escalate it because I've become personally involved in it. I don't care what somebody says to me as a cop. And they did. You know, they throw as many insults. They tell you they're going to find out where you live and rape your wife and your kids. They'd always say that because they want you to lose control and to react. And that then kind of negates, what you have over them, as it were. But anyway, so back to the story. So this one evening, I was out and about on my own, and we had this short wheel-based Land Rover Defender in my station. we used to get all of the cast-off cars down there. I remember at one time we drove around in this smelly old Ford Escort dog van, and it was stinking. No seats in the back. If you arrested somebody, they're rolling around in the back of this thing. But we had this Land Rover, and this call came in that this guy who was quite well known to us, not a particularly nice person, and also made himself worse by taking a lot of drugs. That he was running up and down the street. It was winter time, so it was dark, but running up and down the street outside of a local supermarket with two massive carving knives in his hand. And he was slashing at people as they was walking past, because there was also a train station there, and there was a train coming in at this point where all of the commuters were going to get off, and this idiot was there going at people with the knives. And so I'm there. All I've got on me is a pair of handcuffs, a baton, and my belt, and no body armour, no parva, no taser, nothing.
You don't carry any sort of firearm.
That hadn't no. Police in the UK, the police don't carry firearms unless you're on a specialist unit. So no, I had nothing, and I'm on my own. There's nobody around, so I drive into the street. He's there, and there's a couple of people up ahead. He's just running at these people with these knives like this. They hadn't seen him at this point. They're probably sort of 50 metres away. So I ran him over. I just mounted the pavement and I ran him over in the Land Rover. I didn't seriously injure him, but
yeah, you just gave him at least a shock to just.
Well, it was a bit more than a shock, but it was just enough for me to then get out and drag him out from under, because obviously I kind of stopped on top of him. Fortunately, I had the clearance because I'm in a Land Rover. He's not wedged under the car. Yeah. He's under the car, but of course he's kind of. I've hit him with the Land Rover. It wasn't at speed. It was, I don't know, it was probably like 15 miles an hour. It was fast enough, and but it was enough. It was enough. And then I could get the handcuffs on him, get him out, and job's a good one. But of course, I then end up being investigated by the Internal Affairs Department, by the Professional Standards Department.
I mean, I can understand why, in a way.
Well, it
from the outside, it can sound very, very
you have
wrong.
These things. If you're involved in any contact with the police in the UK, and you die or you're seriously injured within 24 hours of that contact, even if you're not in custody, you are then investigated. It's called either serious injury or death after police contact. We have an independent body. At that time, it was the IPCC, the Independent Panel for Police Conduct, or something like that. And now it's now the IOPC, the Independent Office for Police Conduct. It didn't go that far, but I was interviewed under caution, which is basically when you arrest somebody, you caution somebody. In America, they call it giving somebody their rights, their Miranda rights. In the UK, it's you don't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you don't mention when questioned something you later rely on in court, and anything you do say may be given in evidence, because you have a right to silence. But you're also saying to somebody, if you don't have to say anything at all, but if you don't say anything, now I'm questioning you, and it goes to court, and you come up with an explanation for the first time in court, I'm allowed to tell that court that when you were given the opportunity to explain, you didn't take that opportunity, and it may make them less likely to believe something you're coming up with for the first time in court, because you've had a chance to then come up with an excuse. Yeah. So that's kind of dog's out there again. Can you let her in, because she's only going to start smashing the door down. She's desperate to come in, isn't she? Come on, Snowy.
Big bear.
Big bear. Hello. So anyway, so I was interviewed with this, and unfortunately, as with a lot of these things, they're not there to do you any favours. You know, you are under caution. You're being suspected of something. And I remember them saying, "Why did you do that?" Now we have certain law that allows us to use reasonable force, and the 4 sections of law, although there were only 3 at the time, because one came out subsequently, apply to 2/3 of them apply to members of the public. It's Section 3 of the Criminal Law Act, and it says a person may use such force as is reasonable in the circumstances in the prevention of crime, or in the effecting or the assisting in the unlawful arrest of a person suspected of crime or unlawfully at large. That's the wording of that. The other one is a thing called common law, which is a person may use such force as is reasonable in the protection of self, others, and in certain cases property. And there's another one which is pace, but that was not applicable in this case. So of course I then said, look, you know, I exercised these powers because, you know, he was about to go and attack, in my opinion, my honestly held belief was he's about to go and attack these 2 people who hadn't seen him, and he had 2 massive carving knives in his hand. And they said, well, I understand that, but why didn't you get out and, you know, and talk to him? I said, because he wouldn't have wanted to talk to me. You know, the tactical communication thing, which we consider, I consider would be almost certainly not going to be effective. And it would also then alert him to my presence. He didn't know I was coming, and I would have lost the element of surprise as well. And they said, well, yeah, but don't you think it's a bit over the top to hit him with a police car? I went, no, I don't. I said, what do you expect me to do? I've got no body armour. I've got no means. I said, what do you want to do? I'll tell you what, I'll jump out the car and you can stick the knives in me and I'll cushion them, shall I? And then grab them once they're in me. So don't be ridiculous. I said, what would you have done? Oh, I'd have gone out and spoken to him. I said, and then you'd have ended up with a knife sticking out of you, and he'd have carried on going to do what he was going to do. I said, you know, but this is my first experience of dealing with our internal affairs department, our professional standards department. And that kind of set the tone for every dealing I had with them since. Every police officer who is a good police officer will always end up doing something which the person they're doing it to doesn't like, because people like to be able to do what they want, and the police are there to stop people doing what they want if by doing what they want that negatively impacts upon people around them. And that's kind of what the law is. The law is to keep as many people as safe as possible. Not everyone's going to agree with it. And so I went through that. But this is the thing, that by not having that equipment, by not having body armour, by not having a taser, by not having pepper spray or something like that, I had to use more significant force than if I'd had that stuff. Because if I'd had that stuff, I could have got out, I could have tasered him, which is, once it's over, it's over. You know, the only time people really get injured with taser is when they fall to the ground and bang their head or something like that. The instances, because what you're talking about here is you're not electrocuting somebody. A taser uses a watch battery. It's 50,000 volts, but it is using a watch battery to produce that 15,000 volts. You're not plugged into the mains, but it uses a shaped charge which mimics the signal that your brain sends to your muscles to make your muscles go like that. Mm-hmm. And that's what a taser does. It's not meant. It causes neuromuscular interference. So basically, anywhere where the 2 barbs go, in between that, it creates a neuromuscular interference. So basically, you go, and then you become so unable to control your muscles that you then are incapacitated temporarily to allow the cops to get in, cuff you up, and control you. But that was kind of, I looked back on that then and thinking I was really ill-equipped to deal with something like that. In the interview, they said, why didn't you wait for the armed response unit? They were half an hour away. If I'd waited, in my opinion, those people ahead of him, he would have attacked them and at least seriously injured them and possibly even killed them. So you want me to sit there, watch him do this, or get out of the car and try and talk to him when he's off his face on drugs, and you've already had like 15 calls from people saying he's been he's been attacking people with his knives, he's been slashing at them. I think he'd already cut somebody already by this point. I think he'd already slashed them across the arm that needed stitches, so it was already serious. I said, what do you want me to do? But unfortunately, you're talking then to people who don't do the job, who don't have to make these split-second decisions, because that's kind of what being a police officer comes down to. You may have a fraction of a second to make a decision which has the potential to cost somebody their life. If I'd hit him wrong in the car, I could have killed him. It's not that I didn't consider that. It's not that I didn't care. It's not that I didn't think about it. But at that time, the safety of those people in front of me was of more importance and higher up in my duty of care than him. He'd chosen to do what he was doing. They hadn't chosen to be attacked by him. So I had no choice in that matter. And they, in the end, they said, so if it happened again, what would you do now in hindsight? I said, I'd do it again.
Yeah.
What else do you think is going to happen?
If you don't have any other choices, if you don't have any other options, there are options.
And I said, look, it's not that I ran him over and then reversed over him to make sure of it. As soon as I then got out, controlled him, administered first aid, made sure he was all right, called an ambulance to come down and check him over. What else do you want me to do? But unfortunately, when you are the officer that's there and you have to make those decisions, it's an increasingly prevalent thing now for you to do that, knowing you're not going to be supported. You're not going to be supported by the management, the senior managers. You're not going to be supported by the public, because the public see what you do as being, they don't see the nuance of everything that's going on. And we have a poisonous media who just want headlines. They don't care. One of the things you see all the time, if a police officer is involved in they're driving and they're involved in a crash where somebody is injured, the media will always say, this police officer is now being looked at by the Independent Office for Police Conduct. It's been referred to them to consider offences. Well, of course it is. That's absolutely standard practice. Any incident where somebody is injured, where a policeman is involved, it's referred to them. It is completely standard. It doesn't mean, but the inference is, they know they've done something wrong. Mm-hmm. They've behaved badly. That they've done something wrong, and unfortunately, it's getting to the stage now where, certainly before I left, there were police officers who were thinking twice about getting involved in things which they needed to get involved with, because they think, what's going to happen to me? I can see what's happening next. I'm going to have a complaint made about me. My bosses are not going to care. They're going to throw me under the bus, which they do. And, we have lots of instances of this. I could go into many details, but I won't. And so it's a very difficult job. And this is, your decision making is affected by so many things. And that story is a good example of how my decision making was affected by the fact that I wasn't given the equipment I needed to do the job. If that had been later in my career, I'd have jumped out of the car and tasered him. Because I could have got behind him without him seeing me. I just jumped out and tasered him in the back, which is where you're supposed to taser people, in the back, because there's a larger muscle group in the back. And you're less likely to get a barb in somebody's face or something, which does happen. But, you see these things, and I look back through the history of how my career's evolved, how the police are being, on the one hand, given the tools to do the job, but not being given the support to do the job. My immediate bosses, in fact quite high up the chain, were extremely supportive of what I did. But now I don't think that would be the case. I think there are too many people who are too concerned that they're not being seen to do the right thing, to maintain public confidence. And I think people get chucked under the bus all the time. I've seen it. I've seen police officers and if a police officer comes under investigation, this can take years for them to be investigated. They could be suspended from duty.
Basically, just
years.
ruin their career.
Ruin their career.
Lives.
52% of all police officers who commit suicide are being investigated for either gross misconduct or they're currently being suspended. And these are people who are at that time, under any British law, innocent till proven guilty. But they are made to feel so wretched because of the way that they're treated by the organisation. This is national. If you're suspended, you are completely isolated. None of your friends will get in contact because they're kind of loosely told not to, because you don't interfere with the investigation. And as you know, I've supported a couple of people through a 3-year suspension, and the way that they were treated was appalling. Genuinely, if they had been a member of the public who'd been accused of serious offences, they would have been treated better. 100%, they would have been treated better. And it was unnecessary. The things that I'm talking about here, I'm not talking about the due process of being investigated. That is what it is. You know, if somebody's suspected of doing something wrong, absolutely they need to be investigated, 100%. But there is in place these things that should be there to support that person's human right to well-being. To isolate somebody, to tell them they can't do anything, they can't do charity work, they can't do anything to fulfill their days, you just got to sit at home on your own, dwelling upon this, wondering what's going to happen next, then that's just, it's cruel. And it is cruel. And I'm not surprised so many police officers in the UK commit suicide. It's fast becoming one of the top careers for suicide. I think, what was it? I read something the other day, 300 police officers had killed themselves in the last 10 years. And we're only talking about 120,000 people or so in the whole country as police officers. So that's quite a percentage. I knew of somebody that killed himself. And it's...
Was he in this situation?
He was suspended, yeah. I didn't know him well, but I knew of him. And following this, because at the time I was on the Federation, which is, the police are not allowed to be in a union. You know, I don't know what you call unions over here, guilds or something like that.
I'm not sure.
Basically, you can't. It's a trade association. Mm-hmm. Police cannot strike. You know, they can't go out. They can't withhold their labour under a thing called the 1918 Police Regulations, Police Act. So you can't have a union. So you have a thing called a federation, which is effectively a lobbying or an influencing organisation. And I was a federation representative in addition to you have one or two that are full-time in the federation. I never was. Amanda never was. And during that time, you saw just how many people were treated appallingly. And after this guy killed himself, I thought there's just nothing in place here where there's no defined way of supporting these people. Now, under UK law and European law, you're innocent until proven guilty, and as such, you deserve to be treated with a reasonable amount of care and dignity. So I started doing some research into putting together a recognised policy, a process that if somebody's suspended, for example, that they receive contact once a week from their line manager to make sure that they're okay, so if there's anything that they need, just to check in with them, to give them any updates that person may have. Once a month they get contact from the wellbeing department. We have an occupational health department. These things that would be there just basically to support this person, to make sure that they don't feel isolated, because that's the worst thing. These people, when you're a police officer, it's not what you do, it's what you are, and to suddenly have that identity,
such a big part of your identity, taken away suddenly,
exactly,
under some weird circumstances.
And you always feel that your contribution to the organisation has been valued, up to the point you realise it hasn't been. I myself went through the ringer with something, and in my case, the two departments that are responsible to scrutinise my actions, which was the firearms department and the driver training school, both of them within a week of the incident had sent their reports in saying, He's done nothing wrong. He's acted completely within his training. He needs to be returned to duty immediately. It took them 4 months before they even interviewed me, during which at that time I wasn't allowed to drive a police car. I had to go into the office every day. I wasn't suspended. I was suspended from carrying a gun. I was suspended from driving a car. I had to go into the office. I was doing other people's files. A guy who was a sergeant in one of the other departments said, look, my team, pop in the car with a couple of these guys, go out, because I would still be a police officer, go out and do some work, but you can't drive the car, but go out and feel some sense of purpose. And then this individual who had caused all of this, a superintendent, sent out an email saying that I wasn't allowed to be even a passenger in a car, which by any metric is considered to be an unlawful order and is part of the ACAS definition of bullying, which is to withhold duties without reason. But the organisation, because he was higher up than me, did nothing about this. Nothing. Eventually, they, as I say, the 4 months before they even interviewed me, the whole thing was a farce from start to finish. And the reason that this had happened is because I'd challenged the superintendent as part of my role in the Federation over a shift pattern he was trying to introduce, which was horrific. It would have caused so much sickness. It would have meant that people who had young children would have to take all of their holiday for childcare, and it was disgraceful. And he knew it, but he was doing it because he wanted to save some money. And and I challenged him through my role as a Federation representative, which I'm perfectly entitled to do. But he was such a horrible, vindictive man that when this incident took place, he used it as an excuse to kick me off the department, which ultimately he did. I appealed it. It even went to the Chief Constable, who's obviously the highest rank within the police force. And I had 3 meetings with this person. And every time I had a meeting with him, he came up with this, oh yeah, but you did this. I said, no, I didn't. Oh, well, can you prove it? Yeah, here's the paperwork. Oh, right, I'll look at this and we'll reconvene. And he got to, because basically, the story is I got involved in, I was on the firearms team at the time, and I got involved in a pursuit with a stolen car. And this car, we have different terminology in the arm response unit. When you move forward to deal with the people inside the car, you use the expression strike, strike, strike. Okay, we strike. This car lost control, mounted the pavement, hit a wall, and the engine died. Because of the fact that during the course of this pursuit, the driver and the passenger had swapped places, we knew they were going to try and get out of the car and run. So one side of the car was pushed up against the wall. So I thought, right, I'm going to get alongside him in the police car so he can't open the driver's door. We can then deal with them. We can calm the whole situation down, and it's all about this control again. We can control the situation, get them out one at a time, arrest them. So, because the last thing you want at night is for one suspect to go one way, one suspect to go the other way, because if you are carrying guns, you can't split up. Because if something happens and they, you run around the corner and they knock you out, they've got your weapon.
Get a hold of a weapon.
So you can only choose one, which is okay, but we had the opportunity at this point to be able to slide up alongside and close that car off. But as I went alongside the car, he managed to get it started and he slammed into the side of the police car. He deliberately rammed the police car to try and get away. His car stalled again, I get out of the car, my colleague is there, I'm running around to the front of the car, I see him reaching underneath the car to try and, I don't know if he's trying to get it started or get a weapon or something like that, and he's half in, half out of the car, and my colleague can't see him. I can see him, so I draw my taser and I point it at him in case he gets out of the car with a weapon, in which case I'm obviously going to taser him to incapacitate him so that my colleague is safe and deal with the situation. Anyway, he then saw the taser come out, put his hands up, we arrested him. He was a wanted person. He had a firearm in his house. The car was stolen. He was one of the most prolific car thieves in the area. The other guy in there was wanted for numerous offences. So I thought everything was okay. No, but I then said, I gave an update over the air saying, right, the car stalled, so we moved forward to strike the car to get the occupants out. Unfortunately, the terminology that we were using was not the terminology that was understood in the control room. And they thought I said, I rammed the car, which at that time we weren't allowed to make tactical contact with cars. That's changed subsequently, but at that time we weren't allowed to. So the whole thing kind of went in the air. So I then did all of my documentation.
You didn't have any car cameras?
Yeah, 3 car cameras. All 3 car cameras, black box in the police car to show whether I turned the steering wheel, what I was doing, everything. Within a week, the driver training school had reviewed all of this and said, he didn't ram the car rammed him. You can clearly see the driver do this in the other car. And they said, he's done nothing wrong. He said, the only thing that we would probably say is that you know, next time he came in a little too fast for that manoeuvre by maybe 5 kilometres an hour. That's it. He said, if we had to criticise anything. And the same with the taser. The firearms team looked at it and said, absolutely 100% within his training, 100%. But this superintendent was saying, you know, what were you going to do, shoot him through the window? I said, no, of course I wasn't going to shoot him through the window. I was going to wait for him to get out, see if he had anything. I wasn't going to do anything. And if he came out with his hands up, that's the end of it. It's a compliance tool. If he got out with something in his hands, I was going to taser him.
What if he was just going to shoot like through the window if he had a weapon?
Well, taser's not going to go through a window.
No, but if he had a weapon.
Well, I'd have run away. But he said, I would have preferred you to draw your sidearm and shoot through the windscreen. I said, there was someone sitting in the seat behind him. If I'd shot him, what if it had gone through him and hit the innocent person sat behind? It was a girl. You know, they'd taken along for the ride. Of course I'm not going to fire my firearm through a windscreen at somebody. For what? You know, this was kind of the mentality. It was trying to find something wrong in everything I did. But the firearms training department looked at this and said, no, there's done nothing wrong. This is exactly within his training, 100% within his training. And yet they still kicked me off the department. So eventually I then had this final interview with the chief constable about my grievance about all of these things. And he said, yeah, but the thing is, John, we can't know whether he rammed you or you rammed him. And I said, well, of course you know. And he said, well, how can we know? I said, well, 3 reasons really, sir. I said, firstly, because that's what I've said and I expect you to believe me. Secondly, because here's the report from the driver training school with the 3 cameras and the black box in the police car. And thirdly, possibly more interestingly, if you'd read in my grievance, he fully admitted it in court. And it's like, oh, right, okay, well, he said, well, you've fallen out of love with the department, haven't you? I said, no, I love my department. He said, I'd worked so hard to get onto the traffic department. And they said, well, no, I don't really think we've lost confidence in your abilities. I said, why have you lost confidence in my abilities? And the Federation representative who was with me, there's like a solicitor kind of thing, it's not, but, you know, was from a different police force because I'd got them in from a different police force. And he said, I don't think I've ever seen, and this is in front of the chief constable at the time, he said, I don't think I've ever seen such a systematic inability to support a police officer who's done the right thing.
He said this in front of...
To the chief constable. He said, we've presented you with nothing but irrefutable documentary evidence to show he's done nothing wrong. You know he's done nothing wrong. The reason he is here is because of this superintendent, who we are now going to present you with a pack of information showing what he's done wrong. Suspending somebody without reason, telling people that he can't take them out as a police guard, which is absolutely irrefutable bullying. So we presented you with all this and you're doing nothing about that. And he said, well, okay, I'll apologise for these things to you. And they said, well, why can't he apologise then and go back to driving, being on traffic? Oh, no, it's my decision, I'm the chief constable, get out. And that made me realise, you know, and it was 8 years before I got back on the department. 8 years. In the middle of that, I did get back on the department. And because I was still technically within the period of time of my last advanced driver course, because obviously within the police you have standard driver, which used to be called a grade 4, and then you have an advanced driver, which is a traffic officer, who we have, obviously we have significantly more training and drive more powerful vehicles and blah, 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 blah. And they said, we don't know whether you need to have a full driving course or what have you. So they said, we're going to take you out on a day's assessment and check to see what your level is, because in the 3 years in between, you lose your skills because you're not using it. And I went out for a whole day with one of the driver instructors, and he said at the end of it, he said, yeah, it's all there, it's a bit rusty. He said, you probably need like a couple of weeks just to get yourself back where you need to be, but I don't think you need a full driving course. And I said, look, I really don't care. I said, look, I'm quite happy to do a full driving course. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. I'm just kind of happy to be here. And I went on this driving course. Everything was fine. Up until it was a 4-week driving course. And the first day I get there, the guy who was the head of the driving school at that time was very, very good friends with the superintendent. In fact, they'd been in the same police force before we'd amalgamated it. And he said, oh, so you're the one that thinks he doesn't need a full driving course? I said, that's not what I said, all right? I'm more than happy to do a full driving course. Just treat me like anybody else, okay? All right, well, we'll see about that. So if there's any issues within a driving course, they are required to give you what's called an action plan, which is basically identify where your problems are. They give you this plan on how to improve and how it's going to be measured. Never had one of those. Halfway through, they're supposed to do a cross drive, which means that because there's 2 cars with 2 instructors, and the instructors will then swap cars to check. It's basically checks and balances to check the progress of each other's cars to make sure they're where they need to be. They said, we don't need to do this. Everyone's where they need to be. Everything's fine. You then have a final drive, which is basically just a tick in the box. And at the end of it, they get me and go, you failed. And I said, how have I failed? I said, you failed, you didn't reach the required standard. And I said, with all due respect, if I failed on the final drive, one of the guys left the road on the final drive. He actually lost control of the car and left the road. But he's passed, and I haven't. Is that what we're saying? Yeah. I said, right. At that time, we drove manual gearboxes in cars, and there's a thing called a double declutch. It's a technique that you use, and it was very important to be able to do this properly. And this is why this guy had left the road, because all throughout the entire course, he hadn't been able to double declutch. So basically, you're going from, say 4th gear to 3rd gear, but at high speed. And what you basically do is you put your foot on the clutch, you rev the engine, you take the car out of gear, you take your foot off the clutch, you rev the engine again, you then put your foot back on the clutch, and then you put the car into gear. And you do that literally within half a second, but it becomes a technique that you become. This guy had tried to do this on a bend, lost control of the car because he cocked it up, and driven off into the field at the side of the road. He had passed this driving course. I hadn't. And there was no point in arguing this, because I knew that even though they hadn't done anything, I knew what was going to happen. I just thought, here we go. And it's because obviously this guy was friends with the superintendent. He had heard I was coming back onto the department. He said, fail him. And it was another 4 years. My wilderness years. And I remember going to a road traffic collision. It was fatal, as an ordinary response officer, and dealing with the scene, and because you close the scene because it is effectively a crime scene. I dealt with everything, and the inspector from what was then called the Area Support Unit turned up, and obviously everything was done by the time he got there. Normally they have to do all these bits and pieces, and he said to him, there's an intake coming up, why didn't you apply to come back on the department? I went, what's the point? I said, you know what happened last time, what's the point, sir? And he said, look, I promise you will have an even chance. He said, I'm not giving you any preferential treatment, but I promise you nobody is going to, because that superintendent had left by this point. He retired. He said, I promise you'll have a fair go at it. And so I went and got back onto the department, and thing that I felt most happy with is I then got a text message from that inspector saying it took 8 years, but finally a wrong has been righted. And the reason he knew that a wrong had been righted is because he was my passenger in the car when this incident took place in the first place. So he knew exactly what I'd done. I hadn't rammed that car. He knew exactly why I'd drawn my taser, because he was the one I was protecting. He'd been a PC at the time with me. So he's probably the only other person in the world that actually knew I hadn't done anything wrong. But during the course of the investigation back in the day, it got to the stage where I had an enormous mental breakdown. Because I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. But when you've got everybody in charge of you saying, yeah, you have. Yeah, you have. And not only that, I told you I was going into work every day and I was doing people's files and I was doing all these bits and pieces that was in there. My inspector at the time would walk into, his office was behind the office that we were all in. He would walk in the morning, see me sitting there. He would never even say good morning to me. He literally blanked me. For 4 months, he never spoke to me. How does that affect somebody? This is somebody who's supposed to be there supporting my well-being. Are you okay, John? Everything all right? He completely blanked me. Completely. Never asked if I was okay. Never helped me. Never spoke to me. So you then got these people saying to you, and during those 4 months I was thinking, it's going to be okay. The truth is going to come out. It's going to be okay. They're going to see the reports. They're going to know I haven't done anything wrong. They're going to go, okay, fair enough. Back on. Crack on. And when it got to the after those 4 months, and they said, no, we're throwing you off the department. And I went through all of the processes thinking, no, this is one person. The organisation is going to see, once we present this to them, there's a grievance process called fairness at work in place. I can go through this process. It's going to go to it's going to go to the chief constable. He's going to see. There's no argument. I haven't done anything wrong. There's no argument. I've done everything I should have done, and it'll be fine. And then when he went, no, you're off the department. Something in me just broke, because I realised that there are people that fool themselves, and there are people that go, I've done nothing wrong, and they have. But I kept everything for years and years, until I retired, in fact. And I remember speaking to somebody once on the Federation. I was on a course, and I'd taken all this stuff with me because I was giving a presentation on things, and I'd taken all the names out, so nobody knew who it was. And I said, have a look at this and tell me what you think. And they went, this person did nothing wrong. And I said, okay, now have a look at the process afterwards. And they went, oh my God, this is terrible. How the hell can that be allowed to happen? You know, that can't. He said, this can't be true. I said, it is true, because that's me. And having somebody independent look at it, go, it was absolutely disgraceful. It was so corrupt that it should never have happened. And people complain about corruption within the police force. They only ever focus on the lower ranks. The real corruption takes place in the upper ranks, because they are in a puddle of sharks. That's where they swim. So after I then got this final decision, I wasn't. My head is wrong, and it was only because of this. And I considered suicide. I'm not going to lie. I absolutely did. I remember driving across the bridge between England and Wales one day and seeing some flowers that had been left there where somebody had thrown themselves off. It was Christmas Eve. And I remember looking at this thinking, lucky bastard. And I'm glad I thought that, because it kind of gave me a bit of a wake-up call. And I thought, why am I thinking like this? You know, I've got Amanda, I've got the kids.
So at this time you were...
Oh yeah, I was with Mans, yeah.
Oh wow.
And two things happened. One thing I don't remember, and one thing I do. I remember one day realising that because I'd taken time off because I was very, very badly mentally unwell, and I'd taken time off work.
How did this manifest? In what ways was it?
So difficult. It was just an absolute inability to function. Because, and this is a good example. I remember the girls because obviously they were school kids at the time, and Man was on a day shift. And I remember being in front of realising I'd been stood in front of the oven, the cooker in the kitchen, for over an hour, not doing anything, just trying to decide what to cook, because I knew that whatever I did was going to be wrong. Because that's what had happened. My belief in myself of doing the right thing, they'd taken away from me. They'd said, no, you didn't do the right thing. It's like, well, I did. Everybody, I have. This, I don't. No, you're wrong. And it gets to the stage where I was being gaslit. Do you know that expression?
I think so. It's
basically when somebody keeps telling you something that isn't true, and eventually you believe it.
You believe it, yeah.
And that was and in the end, that was what did for me. That decision was like, I must be fooling myself then. I thought I must be wrong. I must be wrong. And my brain's going like that and disconnected. And one day, something had happened. I think I'd had a visit from. They had to every month. They had to have these visits because you signed off from work, and they have to have this visit to make sure that you're not lying, which just adds more insult to injury. And something had happened, and Amanda came home, and she couldn't find me, and she found me eventually in one of the spare bedrooms upstairs, because there was obviously we had a 4-bedroom house, and one of the bedrooms was a spare room because the kids had their own room, we had our room. And she came in there, there's blood everywhere because I'd been punching myself in the face. I still got the scars on the inside of my lips where I was doing it, and she said all she could hear was stupid man, stupid man, stupid man, and I was punching myself in the face because I just felt that my presence in the life of my family poisoned them, and that they deserve better than having me in their life. Do you remember you did that video for the Dark Heart? Well, there was another video that came after that called Lighthouse, and that's written about that period in my life. And I hated myself so much. When people go, I hate myself, I don't really understand. Some people probably do, but Amanda would try and have these CDs for the younger amongst you. This is a way of being able to play music, and it was from a guy called Paul McKenna, who's a hypnotherapist, and she'd put these things on. You're supposed to lie in bed, go to sleep, listening to this, and it's kind of like, and you do fall asleep quite quickly, but these sort of sessions go on for maybe 35-40 minutes, and within one of these sessions there's a bit where it goes, you are a worthy and worthwhile person, and as soon as I heard that, even though I was asleep, my mind so viciously disagreed with that I woke up. I felt that I poisoned everyone around me just by being alive. I felt that every decision I must have ever made in my life was wrong, because clearly I thought I'd done the right thing, and everyone, my bosses or my organisation that I put so much respect in and faith in, was saying, no, of course you didn't do the right thing. You're a dangerous, crazy man that can't be allowed to carry on carrying a gun. And I never did carry a gun again. And I then went for, fortunately at the time, our welfare department had a guy there who was a retired superintendent, a really nice guy. Nigel was his name. And he was a really decent person, and he got me, you could be referred for 6 counselling sessions, and I had those where I met a woman called Helen, who's now, I don't know if you may have met Helen, she's now a family friend, and the 6 sessions barely scratched the surface, but that's all you were given with the police. If you wanted any more, you had to pay for yourself, but he managed to get more for me, and I dug myself out of this abyss. And Helen eventually became a family friend. And so for me to look back on that time, to understand just how profoundly mental health can affect people, you insulate yourself from it a little bit, because looking back on it now, I don't remember it in the raw way that it was. I remember it, but to protect yourself, you kind of don't think of it quite in the same way. And because, as you know, with Amanda, she was she was doing a lot with mental health within policing, which was kind of the irony of the whole thing. And she was doing a lot with mental health within policing, which was kind of the irony of the whole thing. And And they had these things for the senior management group. And a few years later, it was called Team Gwent. And they would have all of the senior managers, anyone from an inspector upwards, would go to this one day where they had to go there, and they would always present these topics on policing and da-da-da. And she then went there to do the thing on mental health. And they wanted somebody to talk about a situation which was poor mental health. And I said, I'll do it. I mean, I was probably like a 22, 23 year cop by this point. And so I went in there, and the police and crime commissioner was also in there as well. Now, he had been a chief superintendent that had then retired and was then the police and crime commissioner. It's like a separate office which is there to oversee the police. They have crime commissioners in America and places like that, like New York and places. And he was there, and basically everyone was there. And so it came for my speech, and I got up and I said, you all know me, yeah? I mean, I remember when some of you were probationers, you remember me from being on firearms and on traffic. And you know me, but you don't. I said, the problem you have is that people think someone who has a problem with their mental health is weak. I said, I'm not weak. I'm the first person you want stood next to you when you go through a door into a dark house. I'm the first person that will be out of the car if there's a fight. But I want to tell you what happened to damage me so badly. And I told them exactly what happened. Obviously this superintendent was long gone. I never named him. They all knew who he was. He had done this to so many people. So many people. He was just vindictive. Anyone who crossed him in any way, he just went out of his way to destroy them. I wasn't the first, and I certainly wasn't the last. And I told them how it made me feel. I told them that that we need to look at mental health as being something which we understand as being a reaction to an adverse situation. So in exactly the same way as you walk into a situation, you end up in a fight, and you break your arm, it doesn't make you weak. It means that at that particular moment something didn't work out the way you hoped it would, and you've suffered as a result of that in that situation. Anyway, at the end of it, because it was bearing my soul a little bit, and at the end of it, I remember it was awful. They gave me a standing ovation at the end of it, and I just wanted to burst into tears. That was probably the worst part of it, because I thought, I'm not here. That's not why I'm here. I'm not here to glorify myself in this. I'm here to say. I said, and that's what I said at the end of it. I said, look, if you have to deal with someone, deal with somebody, but don't be fucking cruel. You have that choice. As a senior officer, if you've got to deal with somebody for something that you believe that they need to be dealt with, don't be cruel, because that is what will remain. That memory of that cruelty is what will remain. If somebody's done something wrong, make the punishment fit the crime. Most people, they're cops. If I did something wrong, I always had this ethos. If I did something wrong, I will absolutely be the first person to admit it. I'll put my hand up, I will admit it straight away. I won't wait to be told I've cocked up. Because that then means I have that moral balance that if I haven't done something wrong, I expect to be believed. No, you know me. If I've done it, I'll say I've done it. I haven't done it, don't. And that is what happens. And anyway, so at the end of this, the chief constable at the time, different chief constable from the one that was there before, came over to talk to me. And the police and crime commissioner came over and said, so, are you going to be giving John his job back on traffic then? He didn't, obviously. And it was another 2-3 years, I think, before the situation I told you where I went to that. And he said, come back on. And so I'd had my counselling by this point. And I then had hypnotherapy as well, which I went into it 1,000% cynical. And the only reason it happened was because Amanda was doing all this stuff with mental health, and she'd gone on to the TV or the radio to give a presentation about mental health in policing, and she'd been contacted by this hypnotherapist afterwards and said, look, I think that what I do could help the police. Would you endorse me? And she said, well, I don't really know what you do. I can't endorse something I don't know. And she said, well, look, someone come along, have a free session. And so Mandy said, you fancy it? I went,
Patient zero.
I said, yeah, I'll give it a go. And the reason I knew I was so cynical is because, like a year before, we'd gone to an evening show with some friends, and it was a comedy hypnotist. And we're all in the audience. And he's going, right, okay, I want you all to stand there, put your hands together like this, put your hands together like that. And I'm going to count to 3. And when I count to 3, you're going to be completely unable to take your hands apart. Because your hands are going to be glued together, completely unable to take your hands apart. And here we go. And it's 1, 2, 3. And I'm like, poof, like that. This is nonsense. Nonsense. Look next to me, and Mandy's like, what's going on? Why can't I take my hands apart? And she ended up going up there, and I'm not going to tell you what she was doing up there because it was just hilarious. But so for me, I thought hypnotherapy, pile of nonsense, people clucking like chickens, but it's nothing like that. And when I saw, and I was expecting, and again, you know, I've got to accept my own responsibility for having preconceptions with these things. When we went to see this hypnotherapist, her name was Sam, and I was expecting somebody to kind of come in, you know, with sort of frizzy hair and a tie-dye dress and hello darlings, the planets have aligned, and this incredibly professional young almost like a businesswoman came out. And so we sat down, and she said, so, you know, what do you think of this? And I said, well, my view is I don't see this. And I explained the situation. He said, okay, well, let me go through. And in fairness, I'm not into pseudoscience. I don't like mumbo jumbo. And she explained things very, very matter-of-factly. And this aligned very much with a book I'd read previously called The Chimp Paradox, which is about how we have 2 ways of taking information in. We have our primitive side, and we have our cognitive side. So a good example is if a tiger came in the room now, you would think, it's a tiger, I don't want to get it eaten, I'm going to run away. That's your primitive side. But your cognitive side would go, oh, hang on, it's actually a stuffed tiger, it's not going to eat me, I'm all right. It's like cats and cucumbers.
Yeah.
That's the primitive side.
It's like a snake or something.
But that's the primitive side. Not that, like Jeeves, we kind of go, oh, cucumber, probably can eat that. But that's what it was. So I had some hypnotherapy, and it was very, very useful. I have to say, it was something that really helped me. The counselling I'd had with Helen kind of managed to rid my haunted house of all the poltergeists.
Can you just talk me a little bit through it? Like, what does it mean? Because I don't really know what hypnotherapy
the hypnotherapy
consists of, like, generally.
The hypnotherapy thing, with the way that she did it, and it was very simple. If I was to say to you today, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel today? And you go, oh, I don't know, I feel I'm like a 6. I'm 6. And she would say, okay, so what would need to happen between today and tomorrow for tomorrow morning you waking up being a 7? What would need to change between now and then? And then you're drilling down into how much of those are things that you can't affect. You know, there's like, it's 5 days to payday and you haven't got any money. But it's how many of those things are your reaction to why you're not a 7 today. And that's what she then looks at. She then looks at what we can do to reinforce the positive things that have made you a 6 and to reduce the negative things that stopped you being a 7. And she then puts you into this state of quite advanced relaxation, and she does this by creating an image. And this image then, the image that she would create was you're on this balcony. It's a beautiful balcony. You're overlooking this wonderful garden, and it's not just it's a wonderful garden. You go into a lot of detail on this because you really do
want to visualize. Yeah,
100%. And then you have this staircase, and the staircase steps down into it. And I always had my own visualizations of the staircase, which was not, because we discussed this. Because again, Sam then became a family friend, and she said to me once, describe the staircase. And I described it, and she goes, it's so interesting because it's nothing how I think about it when I describe it to people. And she had a wicked sense of humour as well. Oh, she was wicked girl. Wicked girl. Really funny, really cutting sense of humour, loved it. and then you get into this kind of state of relaxation, and then what she does is she sort of reinforces the things that you can build on in your mind, and it's just a matter of you then learning to take in your view of the world not through the window of the primitive mind, but through the window of the rational mind. You know, the stuffed tiger, not the oh my god, it's a tiger, because your mind doesn't. If you say, for example, you, as we were talking about earlier on, going into the military thing, an interview. If you think about that interview 10 times in your mind, and each time think, oh my god, it's going to be terrible, they're going to ask me this, I'm not going to know. Your primitive side of your mind thinks that you've had 10 interviews. It doesn't know that that's just a fantasy. It doesn't know that's just a thought process. It thinks that that is a memory. So what you need to do is you need to focus on this visualization of, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to, I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to make the best account of myself. And I really feel that I have the confidence to be able to do this. And a great example of this comes down to, I'd got back onto this department, the ASU, driving course coming up. The guy that failed me the last time, still the head of the driving school. And I'm shitting myself, thinking, this is going to be, here we go again. And so I said to Sam about this, and we did a lot of work over about 3 or 4 weeks of detaching me from the old memory, this continual fear of it's going to happen again, it's going to happen again, it's going to happen again, it's going to happen again. And I then went on this driving course. And
So at this point you just had a clean slate. So if he were to fail you again...
Well, he wasn't my instructor, okay? But he would have to do the final drive. So he would have the final say-so whether I passed or failed. And of course, when you're on these things, the last thing you want is to have anything on your mind that's negative, because you will make mistakes on a driving course. And there's a thing called post-error dwell. If you cock up something and you think, oh God,
yep.
By the time you thought that, you've cocked up the next thing because you're going so fast that you don't have time to do this. So I knew that my instructor was going to be a guy called Mark, and Mark he'd come across from another force. He wasn't everyone's cup of tea. He wasn't particularly liked by a lot of people. I'd worked with him, or I kind of worked around him previously, and I like him because what you see is what you get. If he's got something to say,
straightforward,
very straightforward. He doesn't suffer fools gladly. He won't pretend that you're good if you're not good. Anyway, so I'd had all this work with Sam, and I mean, you know me, I'm quite self-deprecating. I take the piss out of myself quite a lot. I don't really think I'm the big I am. Like I said to you before, all the heavy lifting in my life's been done by blind luck. I'm not like, look at me, I'm the boy. I'm not like that. But something happened with this hypnotherapy, and I got on this course, and the only way I can describe it is from the moment I got in that car, I was just on fire. Everything I did, even if I made mistakes, it's like, not going to do that again, off we go. And there was only 2 of us in the car. Normally there's 3 in the car on a driving course. And the other guy that was in the car, he'd never done a driving course before. This was his first time. And even though I hadn't really driven in anger for many years by this point, it's, you know what you're doing because you drive to a system. And the instructor had to keep saying to him, listen, stop trying to keep up with him. For him, this is muscle memory. For you, you're learning. You'll get there, but you aren't there yet. So you're overextending yourself. You're driving too fast into situations that you can't handle because you don't have the skill set to do it yet. You will, but don't run before you can walk. But he wasn't listening. And we had this big, it wasn't a crash, but we went off-road, knocked all the wheels off the back of the police car, and when he was driving. And in fairness, it wasn't 100% his fault. It was a particularly difficult bit of road, and it's a really dodgy bit of road, but he came in way too fast for it, and I thought, he's coming in a bit speedy for this. But anyway, so he kept saying to me, oh my God, you're like Mary Poppins, practically perfect in every way. And I kept saying, look, it's not. It's just I've done this before. I have done this before, and I did it for many, many years before. You know what happened, so you are going to get there. You're great, but you've just got to, you've got to realise that you're just a couple of weeks behind at the moment. Because I've had that experience. You haven't had it. You're getting it now. So stop knocking his. And he was, after he had that, he was like, and he was just couldn't pull himself out of that funk. And so I was watching him thinking, that's what I thought I was going to be like. And I took him on one side and said, look, this is exactly, and I explained the situation. I said, this is what I thought was going to be me. Don't do this, because all you'll do is make yourself worse. You've got this. You've got this. You're more than good enough for this. Forget about the car. You've just knocked the wheels off it. It's fine. It'll be fixed in a couple of weeks. It's not, you haven't written it off or anything like that. It's an old car anyway, so, don't worry about it. And I said the corner was terrible anyway, because it was a sweeping corner, came over like that, down, swept down and back up. It was raining. There was a manhole cover right in the middle of this corner. Why they put it there, I have no idea. And he just caught it with the edge of his wheel, completely lost traction, and off we went. It could have happened to anybody. But he obviously added a bit more to it because he came in a bit too quick. And so I was seeing that on him. Anyway, so it came to the final drive. And I knew it was going to be this guy that was going to be sat there. And I had a session with Sam the night before where we went through all this. And I'd had two. She said, right, what I need you to do is write out and send to me what the perfect driving course would look like. No modesty, no anything like this, just what you think that the absolute best driving course could possibly be for you. And so I wrote all these things out and I sent it to her, and then we had a couple of the sessions where she was reinforcing this positive mindset. And we had a session the night before, and the first drive in the morning, and I knew it was going to be, and basically it was between the town called Cwmbran and the town called Hereford, and it's all back roads, and they are windy. It's a challenging road. Any overtake, challenging. And this guy who was going to be doing the assessment, he doesn't really like speed too much, but obviously you do drive fast, but he doesn't. It's not his thing. Some people love going really fast. He wasn't one of them. He liked other things. But I remember getting in the car with him in the morning because I was first up, and we're going to Hereford, and that's where you stop. You have a cup of coffee and a bit of toast in one of the supermarkets there, and then you swap the drivers over, and then the guy was going to go in. And I remember getting in the car, and you do a thing called a cockpit drill. So basically you go through the cockpit, there's all doors closed, seating them up, so you basically go through this pre-flight, for want of a better way of putting it. Mm-hmm. And you only after you've started the engine do you put your seatbelts on. And the reason you do that is if you start the engine and something happens, a car catches fire, you've got to get out of the car, you've got a seatbelt on. It's one more thing that's going to hold you up. Yeah. So you don't put your seatbelts on until you've started the car. And I remember vividly starting the car, putting my seatbelt on, because you say seatbelts on, because you instruct everybody in the car, and him putting his seatbelt on as he put it on. I remember looking across at him, and this is little devil voice in the back of my head went, yeah, you better put that on. And we went off, and at one point I was touching 130 miles an hour, which is more than twice the speed limit. Speed limit 60 on the roads. I touched 130 miles an hour at one point, safely, but on this drive. And we get to the destination and stop the car, reverse, take the seatbelts off, and this is when obviously, and he looked across and he went, perfect drive. And he got out of the car and I was like, this thumping like that in the car. And that's the power of positive reinforcement. That's what the hypnotherapy did. It brought out in me, it wasn't I suddenly became really, really good, it's that it reinforced what was always in there, because I'd been an advanced driver for decades before, and just reinforced it and having that confidence in yourself, which is the complete antithesis of what I told you before, that when my confidence was taken from me by a corrupt and uncaring organisation, it broke me. It nearly destroyed me. It put me into a place where if I hadn't had Amanda, if I hadn't had Helen, my counsellor, because Sam came much later, I would have killed myself. 100%. I would have killed myself. It was so profound, I would have killed myself. I know I would. It was only those girls that saved my life, effectively. So, within the space of one career, you've seen these two things. One, where the positivity of reinforcement can bring out what is in you and make it sharp and distilled and positive. And equally, when somebody does something to you which is cruel, and they knew what they were doing. There was never any belief in their own head that they were doing the right thing. They knew full well what they were doing. That there was this corrupt, vindictive superintendent that for some reason they just allowed him to be a corrupt, bullying, vindictive arsehole. And that nearly destroyed me. So kind of the whole, I know I've kind of rambled on a little bit, but the kind of the whole thing I'm saying here is that within anything you have which is life, positivity, kindness, support is a real superpower. It really is. To believe in yourself, it's not arrogance. Confidence and arrogance are often, there's obviously a bit of a Venn diagram with them, but confidence is knowing you're capable of the task at hand. Arrogance is telling everyone you're capable of the task in hand. That's not the same thing. You may not be capable of the task in hand, but you're going to tell everyone you are. Confidence is that I'm just going to get on with it, I'm going to do this. I can do this, I'm going to do this. But when we build an image of ourselves, we have to have this sense of what we are. We want to feel that we are decent and kind and caring and capable. And when you have and going into something like the military, going into the police, so much of that self-image rests on a need for you to have that reflected back on you, to see that reflected back, for people to value the work you do, because it's hard enough out there as it is, dealing with people that want to kill you, people that want to spit on you, people that don't appreciate anything you've done. When you're inside the police service, if you've not done something wrong, it's not an unrealistic expectation for people to value your contribution, for you to feel, yeah, okay, you've gone way above and beyond for years and years and years. And if something ever happens, we'll give you the benefit of the doubt. We will believe you. Yeah, we'll trust you. But to have that rug torn out from underneath me, that you're shit, you're on your own, you got it wrong.
Everything that you've done up until this point.
Yeah. And even when you've got this thing saying, I didn't do anything wrong. Yes, you did. Because I'm saying you did. I'm the boss, and there's fuck all you can do about it. And that's kind of what it came down to. To feel that sense of helplessness.
And injustice.
And that was the worst thing for me. And poor man, I probably went on about it for 2 years. In bed, before I went to sleep, I'd start talking about it. And how she stayed with me, I don't know. I just went on and on and on. And this is the thing that this is probably why, as you know, I've supported these two guys who have been suspended from the police for the last few years, because it's an injustice what they've been through as well. The way that they've been treated hasn't changed. In 25 years, they haven't. And you always have these things where something happens, and these people in charge go, "Oh, our well-being for our officers is the most important thing to us. We really care about their mental health and their well-being and blah 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 blah." They couldn't give a shit, because the first chance or the first time something happens, it's like, who can we throw under the bus? Oh, you'll do. Don't care that the guy's got a family. The guy's been with you for 22 years. He's never had anything but exemplary service. And you think, okay, somebody's made a complaint. Chuck him under the bus. That'll do. That'll keep the media off our back.
I guess it just shows that those people that you were supposed to have as your superiors, who I guess you needed to have a very good level of trust in, they just
Yeah,
they were just shallow, and
Yeah.
you know, I guess that just destroyed how you saw the world in a way.
I was a sergeant before I retired. I got promoted in the latter part of my career. I was, because in the police you back in the day, it's different now. You did an exam, and it was 150 questions in 180 minutes. It's pretty heavy,
Yeah.
and it's done on 4 subjects. It's general police duties, crime, evidence and procedure, and traffic. Those are the 4 categories that you're tested on. It's multiple choice, and if ever you see the film Hot Fuzz,
I have to watch it.
the bit at the beginning where he's in an exam room and you see him go, he always ticks 4 C's as he goes down, because there's always a thing in the police, if you come to the end of an exam, multiple choice exam, and you haven't finished, just tick C, because it's more often than not C. That's why that's in Hot Fuzz. But I did that and passed that, and then you had a part 2 where you went to Henley, which is one of the Metropolitan Police's training centres, beautiful building, and you did this scenario-based thing. It's called part 2, where you had 5 scenarios, and you then had to deal with each scenario, and you were marked on that. And then if you passed that, you were then what's called a substantive sergeant. So you were qualified. Sorry, not substantive. You were a qualified sergeant. And then you had to go before a board, and if you passed that board, you then became a substantive sergeant. So but once you've passed, you can request to do temporary. You can temporarily be promoted, and I was temporarily promoted within my station, funnily enough. So I was Johnny the PC on Friday, and then Johnny the sergeant on Monday, and for some reason everyone thought I must have had some kind of brain transplant over the weekend, because suddenly they were asking me questions they wouldn't have dreamed of asking me on Friday. And when I had the end of that, and I had my appraisal on that, my inspector, who was not a pleasant man, said to me, he said, my biggest problem with the way that you supervised was you placed far too much emphasis on the well-being of your staff. And I went, seriously? And he said, yes. I said, in what way? And he said, if one of them wanted to go to the dentist or go home early or something like that, you always said yes. I said, yeah, well, why wouldn't I? As long as we can cope, why wouldn't I allow somebody, if they had something they needed to do, to go and do it, knowing that when they come back, if I ask them to do something, then they will do it. I said, obviously, that this is a reciprocal thing here. If somebody asked to go home early because they wanted to go to a football match or something like that, and I said yes, and then a week later I said, look, I need you to do something for me, I need you to work on for a couple of hours, and he went, nah, then they would never be allowed to go home early again.
It's like a subconscious deal.
Exactly.
They make between two people, like some.
And I said, well, look, this is my shift's sickness rates, which is half the sickness rates of the other shifts, where you've got the kind of sergeants that you like who just say no to everybody all the time. And I said, I don't agree that putting the well-being of my staff very high on the agenda is a weakness. I think it's a great thing. I said, they are obviously comfortable coming in to work and being able to talk to it. And in fact, during the course of that, there was a guy who came in for, because obviously I did appraisals on them, and during the course of it, I said, what's wrong? And it turned out that he was a male officer, and he was a victim of domestic abuse, quite serious domestic abuse and coercive controlling behaviour, where the woman he was with at the time was saying, if ever, and she was hitting him, it was physical. In fact, what brought it up was he had a big bruise around there, and something down there as well. And I said, and I just made a joke about it, because obviously, we get into tussles on the weekends and stuff like that. And I said, you need me to send you for a bit more OST training? And his answer just wasn't, well, because normally you go like, yeah, no, I should have ducked, shouldn't I? That's what you kind of expect. And he went, no, it's all right, Sarge, it's all right. And so you think, hang on.
What's going on?
Yeah, this is not. So I said, everything all right? And you could see, and I said, look, tell me what's going on. What's the matter? And of course, this all came out. And to cut a very long story short, it was dealt with. And of course, his fear was, because he's a male police officer,
Nobody would care.
Nobody would believe him.
Nobody would even believe him.
If a complaint was made and the female partner was spoken to, she had said to him, "I'll tell them you raped me if you do this, and I'll ruin you." And so his fear he wasn't just a victim of the abuse as well. He was also a victim of this coercive, controlling behaviour. So it isn't obviously very predominantly, the victims are female, but every now and again it is a male, and not only a male but a cop as well. And he was, the whole thing was sorted out in the end. But if I hadn't given a toss about his well-being, it would never have come out.
If you would have just been a little bit less vigilant.
It wasn't. I don't think it was vigilance.
I don't know. Just
it was just it was caring about people, isn't it? I think if you care about if you, because obviously you're looking at becoming an officer, if you care about your staff, if you support your staff, if you try and say yes to your staff, there will always be one or two that will take the piss. There'll always be one or two that will think, "Oh, I'll confuse the kindness with weakness," and you have to deal with it. And I've had to deal with that, where you've said to people before now, when I ask you to do something, you do understand I'm not actually asking you, yeah? I'm telling you, but I'm doing it in a respectful and considerate way. If you need me to order you to do things because you can't be spoken to in the same way as other people, then that's fine. We will obviously modify our relationship accordingly. But obviously you will then know that the reason I speak to you in that way will be because you find it difficult to understand. Otherwise, I'm actually giving you orders. And that's fine. Sometimes you have to deal with things like that. But predominantly for me, why have I got to make someone's life more difficult? My job as a supervisor was to take away the things that stop people from being able to do their jobs. I'm not there to make it more difficult for them. I'm there to make it easier for them if I can, so they can do the thing that they're employed to do. If I don't turn up one day, that's fine. Nothing really changes. If they don't turn up one day, it's chaos, isn't it? This is why it's like the thing is that who's most important, the person that cleans the offices or the chief executive officer? If the chief executive officer has a week off to go and play golf in the Algarve, things kind of carry on. Give the cleaners a week off, and everyone's drowning in the shit. So focus on who actually provides the thing that matters the most in life. And generally speaking, it's not at the top of the pyramid, it's at the bottom of the pyramid. So if you have a chance at the bottom of the pyramid to help the people to come into work and actually enjoy their day, you've got a responsibility to do that. And I don't think it's a problem for people. I don't enjoy the flex. Being a sergeant, the only reason I did it was because it made my pension a bit more valuable. People call me sergeant because some people want to get promoted to be called sir or something. No way, I couldn't care less. We're all fellow passengers to the grave, aren't we? And I don't know. I don't understand why people need to get such a buzz out of it. I think, and of course I've got a unique perspective on it because I was treated cruelly by my supervisors, and the bottom line being I couldn't do anything about it, even though it was completely unjust, even though everybody knew that I'd been treated unjustly and unfairly. Who's going to stop them? Because there's nobody to stop them. There's nobody to complain to. When you get to that level, that chief constables and people like that, there's no one to complain to unless they do something criminal. Snowy. Unless they do something criminal, there's nothing you can do about it. They can get away with anything, and power corrupts. And having felt how that made me feel, having experienced that, knowing how close to the edge that pushed me, I won't be that person. I would rather have one or two people try it on and me have to have that difficult conversation with them than just be an arsehole because of one of those one or two people. The other people in that group don't deserve me being like that because of those people. I'll deal with those people. Focus your attention where it needs to be focused. And equally, having had people who are kind to me and having people who have believed in me, I've always wanted in life to be able to
Give it
pay
all.
that forward.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of important. Nobody remembers arseholes, do they? Nobody remembers arseholes. I don't know, don't get me wrong. I have...
Maybe you do, but you just remember them in a very bad light. And
Yeah.
nobody, I think, wishes to be remembered in.
Some people don't care.
Yeah, maybe.
Some people really don't care. Some people almost see it as being, there's an expression, isn't it? I'm judged by the quality of my enemies. Really?
If you're a samurai, but you're not a
Yeah,
samurai.
yeah, exactly. I'd rather try to not have
It
enemies.
depends the enemies that you have, I guess. If they're also honorable people and you both have some sense of respect for each other, then maybe that would be something interesting
Yeah.
to look at. But in most cases,
If your enemy's your enemy because they don't like you trying to do something good, then fine. But if you have an enemy because you're a dick, that's kind of a different matter, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah,
There's no mutual respect there.
So I mean, it's not really much of a policey story with that one, apart from the fact that it is kind of an insight into the fact that, and it helped me when I was talking to people, because you deal with a lot of mental health issues and people who are having issues and problems. And I would often say, look, this uniform doesn't protect me from life. I've had tragedies in my life. I've had
Anything, it exposes you to life more.
it exposes you you see other people's, but as with anyone, just because you put a uniform on doesn't mean that you're not human. And there are certain people out there that do dehumanize you as cops. I remember one night we were in a little town called Riska, and we popped in to get some health food, kebab. And I got back to the car and I'm sitting in the passenger seat because the other guy's driving, and we're just about to go and try and get some food. Refs, we used to call it, State 4. And this is like a Saturday night or something. It was probably about 10:30 or something. I was on an afternoon supernoon shift, so 5 p.m. to 3 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy, an older guy, was kind of stood outside. We got back in the car and just put my look out, and he's kind of staring in the window. And I thought he was trying to. So I wound the window down. I said, "Can I help you, sir?" And he said, "Having a break, are we?" I said, "Yeah, we're going to grab some lunch now. We're going to grab a bit of food." And he went, "No, I'm paying for you to have a little break then, am I? With my taxes?" And I went, "Well, we have to have a break, sir." And he went, "Oh, do you? Do you?" I said, "Yeah." I said, we're on a 13-hour shift. We're required by law to have a break. We don't run on batteries, And he's like, "Oh, right, okay." I said, "The difference is, sir." I said, "Do you work?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you have a lunch break?" He said, "Yes, of course I do." I said, "So do I." So the difference is that this is my 6th lunch break on this rotation. Of those other lunch breaks, I've never got to finish my food because something's come in and I've had to go out into it. I said, I think the longest I've had for any of my breaks has been 25 minutes. I'm supposed to have 45 minutes by law. So I'm breaking the law under Health and Safety Act by not taking my 45 minutes and going off to do something because of the exigencies of duty. I said, "But we have to eat." I said, "Come on, be reasonable." And he just couldn't get his head around it. He just looked at us as being robots.
Some people are just thick, to be honest.
He wasn't thick. He wasn't an unintelligent man. It's just his attitude was
That's what I mean. I don't mean it thick in that sense. Just thick in
thick-skinned.
Yeah, I don't know.
But people do.
Some mental barriers put in place. Something going on that just.
I think
it's almost impossible to even try to convince.
There was a guy in, I think it was the Metropolitan Police, in the last maybe 3 or 4 weeks, a police officer there was dismissed because he referred to a woman as being a bit dim.
A bit dim.
A bit dim, or a bit dumb. A bit dumb, I think he was actually. You've been a bit dumb. And I think the story was that this person had been trying to make a complaint, a malicious complaint about somebody. And he picked her up on this and he said, "Look, you're just being a bit dumb about the whole thing." She made a complaint. He lost his job. He was dismissed without notice for calling somebody a bit dumb. Because there's such an unrealistic expectation on police officers now.
It's stupid because it wasn't even him, saying you're dumb. No, you're being a bit dumb, which just means you're not taking this issue the way maybe you should be. You're not thinking about it the way you should be. It's just
But
wow.
But when you have, because the ethos of any kind of disciplinary action is to maintain public confidence. The problem is that who is the public? The vast majority of the actual public are people who, if you ask them, they go, he doesn't need to be dismissed for this. It's ridiculous. Of course he doesn't. Okay, say don't call somebody that again. Make a pocket notebook entry. Get on with your work. You know, all of the money that's been invested in this guy, in his training, in all of the things that he's done, has now been thrown away. So you're now going to have another person come in to be trained back up, you know, somebody who's got no experience, and I think, generally speaking, that it's got to the stage where every police officer in the UK, I mean, I can't speak for any other force, but every officer in the UK does their job in the full understanding that they will never be supported by their organisation if something happens, if a complaint is made. My old sergeant said to me, the only people that never get complaints are people that don't do anything. So you're going to get complaints, and as long as you know you haven't done anything wrong, you'll be all right. And obviously my experience of that was that is absolutely not the case. Sadly. And you know, obviously the last thing I'm saying is that cops should be bulletproof. No, they shouldn't. If a police officer is accused of doing something wrong, of course it should be investigated. Of course it should.
But they should be rightfully investigated.
But it should be done appropriately,
yeah, of course,
quickly. And if they have found that he's done the wrong thing, then the punishment should fit the crime.
Definitely, yeah.
As a police officer, you are never off duty. Anything that you do off duty, you can be disciplined for. Even if you're in Australia, you say something or do something over there in Australia, the fact that you are a police officer means that you will then face a disciplinary hearing back in the UK, or some form of investigation. However, you should still be able to expect to be treated fairly. If you were in the UK, if you're accused of a criminal offence, it has to be proven beyond reasonable doubt. Okay? That's the burden of proof, beyond reasonable doubt. With the police, it's the balance of probabilities. Is it more likely to happen than not? So the burden of proof is significantly lower than a criminal. So you can you can lose your career, you can lose your house, all of these things on. It's the only thing where the burden of proof is that, for that degree of outcome. It's called the civil burden. Normally, it's a civil court, which is a non-criminal court. For like, did somebody run your fence over with their car and not pay for it? But it's being a police officer now is an entirely different game from when I joined. I knew when I joined that if I was honest and decent and worked hard, tried to be robust, tried to be what I thought the public wanted to be, which is honest, knowledgeable, decent, fair, but this is the line in the sand. I'm going to protect criminals. I protect you from criminals, and if I have to be forceful in doing that, I'll be forceful in doing that. People don't like being told they can't do anything they want to do, so sometimes you've got to tell people that they've acted in a way that's inappropriate. And for me, the public want that in their police officers. So why is it that our organisation doesn't promote that in our police officers? It's just like, you call somebody a bit dumb, that's it, that's your career gone. Even if they're being a bit dumb. Even if you are just telling them something that they need to hear. You're being a bit dumb. You're being stupid. And I told people they're being stupid, but I don't know if I couldn't go back into being a cop now, because everything about being a police officer that I kind of hold dear, I would be doing it knowing full well that even if the biggest criminal in the world made a complaint about me, my organisation would take his side any day of the week. In the first year that we had body-worn cameras, complaints against police, I think, dropped by 93%. Because people would come and go, the cop called me this, that and the other. No, I didn't. There's the footage. So people do make malicious complaints or misinterpret things.
Yeah.
I remember dealing with this drunk woman outside a nightclub once, and she was absolutely trying to start this fight with another woman. Horrible, horrible woman. And there's a I think it's under the Violent Crime Disorder Act, where you have the ability, if somebody's likely to cause a public order offence, you can issue them with a direction to get off the town. You can order them to leave a certain area, and you can order them to remain away from that area for up to 48 hours, and you can tell them what path they have to take to leave as well. And I issued this woman with this because she was, you're outside a nightclub, it's already a little bit fractious, there's already a little bit of a tinderbox going on there, and she was absolutely winding the situation up. She was being really, really horrible. So I went over, I got on one side. She wasn't having it. Obviously the body camera was on. I was with my shift partner, Julie, at the time. Now Julie was fabulous. Probably about my age, Scottish girl. She'd been a community officer beforehand, really knew how to speak to people, really balanced, really nice, but still didn't take any nonsense off of anybody. And so we're talking to this woman, and I'm saying, look, I've asked you numerous times to calm yourself down. You're clearly not going to do this. So now I'm making this official. I'm issuing you with this notice. You need to leave, and you need to go home via this path now and not return within 12 hours. If you do, then you'll be arrested. And you can't tell me what to do. That's the usual thing. I said, well, I can tell you what to do, and this is the power I'm using to do this. You are going to cause problems here if you don't go. And obviously, as you fill in the form out, part of the form was occupation. I said, what's your occupation? She said, well, I'm a teacher, so I know my rights. I said, right. I said, in that case, what you have to understand is you're in what's called a notifiable occupation. Okay? If you get arrested for a public order offence, we will be informing your employer. So be thoughtful here that this could put your career in jeopardy. All you need to do is go home. Just go away, go home, forget about this, all right? But if you carry on and you get yourself locked up, we have to inform your employer, and that could have serious consequences for you. Anyway, cut long story short, we got rid of her in the end. Next day, she came in with her mother to complain about me. You were really abusive to my daughter. I said, no, I wasn't abusive to your daughter. Yes, you were. You even threatened to get her sacked. I said, no. And I explained, that's not what happened. I said, well, with all due respect, madam, you weren't there. Okay, this is exactly what happened. Your daughter was very, very verbally abusive. I said, and in fairness, she was extremely lucky she didn't get arrested. In fact, if anything, when I found out what her occupation was, I was even more inclined to help her to do the right thing and get away, rather than just say, okay, well, you've had your opportunity and lock you up. Anyway, she said, I want to make a formal complaint about you. You were abusive to my daughter, and you have no place being a police officer. And I said, you weren't there. That's not the case. Yeah, this is what. So I said, okay. So I went and saw my supervisor, because obviously he was in the room at the time. And I said, look, we got the body cam footage. I said, are you okay with us playing it? And he said, yeah, under the circumstances. So obviously we just played it to Mummy and showed just how hideous her daughter had been on the town. There was no apology. There was no, I'm so sorry I came in here and accused you of these things and said I was going to have your job and this, that and the other. It was just, and walked out. They were both middle-class people. Mum was a company director, because she kept telling us she was. These are not stupid, ignorant people. They are people who are entitled. They are people who think they can do anything they want and there are no consequences. But you as a police officer, you do your job properly, I'll take your job from you. And then when you've proven that you've actually not only you've done the right thing, but you've been extremely lenient in the way you've conducted yourself and thoughtful, I'm not even going to apologise for being so horrible to university. That's what police officers have to deal with these days in the UK. And this is why so many of them suffer from poor mental health. It's not dealing with the criminals. It's not dealing with the hours. It's not dealing with the workload so much.
The humanization.
Yeah, it's being made to feel that no matter what happens, you're only as good as your next complaint. And that any complaint that comes in, anything that happens, you're completely unsupported. And I just think I know it's a little bit I've got a bit of a vested interest in this, but I haven't ever seen that change. When I started in the 90s as a cop and went through the experiences I went through, as I told you, where I was accused of doing the wrong thing by effectively saving 2 people's lives, being treated as though I'd done something willfully corrupt and wrong by the investigation for running this guy over, to then seeing, even now, 36 years on, no lessons have ever been learned by the organisation. They still just do the same thing. You are nothing to them. I mean, we all have collar numbers. As you know, mine was 326, and everybody will tell you, if anything happens, you're just a number. You're not a person. They don't care about you. They're only interested in their own skins, and it's a sad fact. And you know, I've seen cops do things that are just remarkable. You know, they have absolutely risked their lives for either somebody who's caused the situation willfully that they've got themselves into, or for people that they've locked up 100 times, and then they just go home at the end of the day. In my small force alone, you know, you were getting on some Friday and Saturdays 1,600 calls a day, and yet of those 1,500 or 1,600 calls, probably you get a complaint about police officers probably every, I don't know, 4 or 5 days. Somebody complain. And yet, the media, social media, popular criticism is like, oh, they're all corrupt. They're all corrupt. Oh, come on. Really? Come on. They're not. I have worked with 2 terrible police officers. I have. But by and large, because we just had the Police Bravery Awards in London recently, but by and large, people never see the things that cops do. They never see how much risk they have on a daily basis. They never get praised for it. In my probation, I was driving home one night, coming down the motorway, and there's a car in front of me going all over the road like this. And so I phoned it into the control room and said, look, I'm behind this car. I passed the index number of this car, and I went, oh, stolen. So right, so I'll stay behind it, and so we're going to get someone down to you. So right, I'll stay behind it. This car then lost control, crashed into a central reservation on the motorway. 2 guys get outside and run off into this housing estate. I pull up behind them, lock my car up, run off. I'm off duty. I'm wearing jeans and a t-shirt because I've obviously taken my uniform off. Run through this housing estate after them. Identify myself as a police officer. They decide they want to fight me, so I'm fighting 2 guys. I don't know where the hell I am, because obviously I'm in the middle of a housing estate I don't really know. One of them has hurt his wrist where he crashed the car, so he's not much of a problem. But the other one, I ended up tussling with him, kind of getting him on the floor, grabbing hold of him, then getting back on my mobile phone, little flip mobile phone back in those days, very sexy. And seeing the street, calling them. Cops turn up. I've arrested these 2 guys. I hand over the arrest of these other people. They're taken away. The car was stolen. There was a ton of drugs in the car. These 2 boys, one of them had tried to abduct a 12-year-old girl off the side of the street in Bristol. One of them was wanted for sex offences. One of them was wanted for a serious assault on somebody where he basically nearly cut his arm off. Anyways, so I went home, and I was thinking the next day, because obviously I told the people that turned up who I was, as I'm 3 to 6, I'm off duty, I was just going under that. Okay, right. I spent coming the next day, and I had my boss go, that was good last night, well done. Nothing. Never to this day ever had anyone say thanks for that. These were people who were wanted for serious offences, and nobody even went, good job, Peter, well done. But that's what cops do. You know, I would have done it again. Of course I would. I won't go, oh, I didn't get anything last time, I'm not doing it again. That's not what it's about. However, if during the course of that, these days, one of them had said, oh, he called me a nasty word, they go, oh, did he? Oh, well, I'll tell you what, have a biscuit and a cup of tea. I'll take your statement and then we can sack him for you. And I know I'm kind of making that to be an amplification, but I think people generally feel that that's kind of the situation that they exist in at the moment in time. Loads of things that I was in off duty again in by the seaside, by this massive cliff, with my mate who was from a different police force, eating ice cream. And this guy walked past us and he was clearly agitated, got to the edge of the cliff and we could see him up there, and then somebody came back to the Coast Guard station behind us, which is like a Coast Guard to look after the beaches and stuff like that, and saying, I think he's going to chuck himself off. And this is like a massive cliff, it's like the height of that thing over there. And so we identified ourselves that we were off-duty cops. I said, look, we obviously were just wearing walking clothes, so we kind of walk near to him and we'll just see what's going on. And as we're getting over there with Ash, right, because you can see him and he's like looking over the edge of the cliff and walking back, and he's looking over the edge of the cliff and walking back. Like, he's going to go. He's going to go. He's just getting the courage up to just throw himself off. So I said to Ash, right, you distract him and I'm going to grab him. So as we get close, Ash goes, "You've got the time, buddy." And this bloke went, "Huh?" And I grabbed him and we both nearly went over the edge of this cliff. I proper shit myself. I think Ash gripped him as well. We get him down and we managed to get hold of him and control him. And then this Coast Guard guy comes over and we get him into the thing and get him back to the station. Cops turn up and he's detained under the Mental Health Act and he's taken to a mental health assessment centre. And he was actually had been a firefighter and he'd had a marriage breakdown and everything gone sideways, and he was going to go and kill himself. So we obviously gave our names, because the thing is, as soon as you grab hold of somebody, you're technically using force, so you've got to be able to justify your force. So I had to do a pocket notebook entry when I got back on duty to say that whilst I was off duty I did this and this, because I have to justify. I used common law because of blah, blah, blah. A couple of weeks later we had this letter turn up from the divisional commander from that force area that we were in. It was in South Wales force area, which had come via my divisional commander recommending us for a chief constable's commendation. He said, without doubt, these officers saved this guy's life and placed their own life at significant risk in doing so. Never heard fuck all again. Nothing. No commendation, nothing. They just forwarded the letter on to me from this guy. Nothing. And, and most cops will have similar stories to this, where they've done something, probably off duty or whatever, where they've saved somebody's life, and they've had you don't do it for the recognition, you don't. But when you have had your organisation informed of what you've done off duty, and the fact that there was a very real risk to your own life in doing this, you kind of think it would be nice for them to just send...
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, so just send a little thing saying, I just got this, really well done, thanks, keep up the good work. Even something like that would be all right. Nothing. It's just like, forward that on. And so people feel unvalued. And if you feel unvalued, why would you then go the extra mile? Why would you do it? But they do, all the time. Cops do all the time. They go the extra mile. And there is when you have these things appear in the newspapers of these cops that do these terrible things, like I said, that there was the Wayne Couzens guy that abducted Sarah Everard. Obviously that's such an extreme case that nobody can have anything but disgust for that. But when any police officer hears of any cop that does something that's either corrupt or willful or there's this kind of perception, I think, from the public that we all close ranks, we all look after each other. Hell no. There is nothing that disgusts a police officer more than a corrupt police officer, in my opinion and in my experience. And I'm not talking about when people are accused of things like.
When it's proven, I guess.
Yeah, but when you have people who clearly have done these terrible things, or even just these things which are just, I'm trying to think of like an example of something that's happened recently, and they pop up from time to time, and even when people leave the police force, in the newspaper, the former police officer, he's been gone 20 years. He's got nothing to do with the police. The former police officer did this, and this. Like, Yeah, he was a police officer in 1994. Former police officer, I should say. And it's just like, I think that there should be more emphasis put on kind of appreciating the people in the emergency services, the paramedics and the firefighters. I think that they need to be shown a bit of love every now and again, rather than this continual hatred, and they're all the same. It's like we're all some kind of automaton, and we all think the same. We're like a collective.
All cops are bastards.
All cops are bastards. Yeah, some cops are bastards. Some cops are incompetent. Some cops are stupid. But in my experience over the decades, the vast majority of police officers are doing a really difficult job, and do really, really the best that they can. Do we make mistakes? Of course we do. Everyone makes mistakes, but I think probably the predominant negative thing within police officers, I think I found, is that there are some lazy ones, and they don't want to get involved in stuff. They try and sleeve things, we would call it. They don't want to go and deal with something. And that used to really enrage me, because if somebody, whenever I would take probationers out for attachments, I would say, look, you've got to bear in mind one thing. You may deal with 100 incidents in a week, and you can become a little bit jaded by the end. You become, your emotional reservoirs can be a little bit reduced,
drained.
But you've got to understand that everybody that you encounter, you may be the first police officer they've ever spoken to. And if you come across as being disinterested or dismissive, then
that's going to be their...
It's going to leave a taste.
It's going to leave a big mark on them and a big impression.
Yeah.
That's where you get all this hate from.
Yeah, because they'll tell people, and with social media, that kind of experience can be shared very, very quickly. And of course, there will always be people on social media that want to enhance a negative. I remember I put something on social media quite recently, and it was meant to be, I think it was something to do with it was an immigration thing, and I was saying, look, let's be open to people and stop. If you meet somebody as an individual, you wouldn't be an arsehole to them, would you? So why are you thinking like this? Try and understand why you feel this way. Don't just blame everybody for everything else. And somebody who's on there, I'm not blind to the way. So, well, maybe you are a little bit blind to this. It's, just try and understand that you haven't got to be the same as everybody else. Just show the kind of respect and consideration that you expect in return. If you don't get it from somebody, then that's fine. You then respond to that individual in the way that you see fit. But to say because you have had third-hand story of somebody has been treated negatively by somebody who was of a certain race, what right does that give you to say, well, they're all bad then, aren't they? I mean, come on now. Let's just... But this is obviously somebody, guys, he just wanted to push the hatred, didn't he? And I just put something on there just to say, let's be all mindful of the fact that, But of course, somebody always wants to hate. And there are so many people who use social media. I'm not going to say that social media is full of people like that, but people who think like that do use social media because it gives them that anonymity. It gives them that ability to be abusive or cruel from a distance.
It's no longer two people talking more or less face to face. It's them chucking things over walls.
Of course,
I've heard that analogy, and it's perfect for
absolutely,
the internet. The anonymous part of it is just the big wall, and you're just throwing things.
We used to call them in the cops 100-yard heroes. You deal with somebody, and they go off with their mates. They get to the corner and turn and go, "Whoa, go!" and run away. Now they think that they're being hard, but of course the reality is you are showing everybody that you're too frightened to say that when you're standing in front of me, because you're too cowardly, you're too afraid. You've got to wait until you think there's enough distance. In a way,
you do know that what you're doing is kind of wrong because you're running away.
Exactly. And they say it and they run. It's like,
you
think in your head that you look like you're being a bit rebellious and a bit hard. But anyone who thinks about this, realise that you did have your opportunity. If you want to say that in front of me, then okay, I'm going to deal with what happens. But I'll have a lot more respect for you, and people will occasionally do that. And I will give you the respect. If you don't like me, by all means, have your say. As long as you are saying it in a way that's not unlawful, you can have your say. As long as it's not going to impact negatively on other people or harass other people. But when you get to the corner, you think you're being hard, you think you're being rebellious, but as cops, we just think, oh yeah, okay, mate, off we go then, silly little boy. And this is what happens on social media. You may think, I'd fucking take you outside and smash your face in. You wouldn't have said that in front of me. Well, I'd hope you wouldn't have said that in front of me, because I would hope that that you'd have enough common sense to realise that that's not the way to behave in polite society. But social media allows people to air their most negative traits. I think we spoke a while back talking about division now, and you know my views on it. I really hate the fact that we live in a society where any group of people is told they can't, that making good choices, working hard, being decent is of no use. I hate that, and I think anyone who comes into any country who intends to try and bring positivity to that country, I would welcome them. There's enough people in the UK who have never contributed to the country,
yeah, sure,
but they're just British citizens, and they are usually the same ones that are demanding all these immigrants who don't respect law and order, whilst they're throwing a petrol bomb at a police car. It's like, do you not see the irony in this? Anyone who wants to contribute positively to the world, I think, should be encouraged. Anyone who wants to destroy, I don't care what citizenship they have, they need to be looked at in that way. And there's a lot of it in the UK at the moment, this divisiveness. And what annoys me is it's all under this guise of patriotism, and whether using the St George's Cross, the English flag, or the Union flag. And I really don't like that, because the Union flag really should represent the fact that is a country which has fought and died for other people's freedoms as well. We've made a few mistakes in the past, but as much as recent history as we can muster, we've tried to sort of redress those balances a little bit.
Yeah.
We're not pretending we are perfect by any stretch of the imagination as a historical nation, but we've also done a few good things in the last couple of hundred years as well. And I think, anyone who wants to use a flag for division, I just think, no, that's not the way it should go. And unfortunately, social media is just amplified people's hatred. And we just dwell on the negative. I just wish we could sort of arrest this downward decline and start looking at the positivity in the world. You see the news and it's just death, horror, destruction and mayhem, and then right at the bottom there's like a story of some 3-year-old kid whose dad had a heart attack, and he phoned the ambulance service and started doing CPR on him. So why can't that be the headline? Why can't we champion the good stories? But of course that doesn't sell newspapers, because it's only fear and sex that sells, isn't it? And I think that as I've gotten older, because as you know, we're looking to return back to the UK, and Amanda said, right, when we go back to the UK, are not going to be looking at the news, because it just gets you angry. And I said, okay, I can understand that. And so what I've done is I found these stations, and they just publish good news. And I do recognise it in myself. The more I read bad news, the more angry I get. The more angry I get, the more negative I feel. The more negative I feel, the more it feeds into sort of just generally bad mood.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be like that. I think we all have a chance to arrest that, and I'm not saying be blind to the things that are going on around you.
But you are not the kind of person that you could say, yeah, you're blind to this.
No.
You should look more at bad news.
No.
I think you've been on the front cover of many horrible instances where you had to interact with horrible things.
Yeah, but that in and of itself isn't. It's never It's never the thing. It's whenever something has happened, which is what's led up to that thing. The thing is what it is. It's if it is because we stopped calling car crashes, we used to call them RTAs, road traffic accidents, and we stopped doing that because he said there's always somebody responsible. It's not an accident, it's a collision. Somebody's always responsible to a greater or lesser extent. And kind of life is like that. You know, there's, when you go to something which is horrific, generally speaking, it's a consequence of an action or a series of actions. And I think the thing for me has always been, was the catalyst that started this chain of events done willfully with malice, or was it somebody just either... As a cop, you meet the bad, the sad and the mad. If somebody bad has started this, then they deserve very little sympathy. If somebody sad has started this, then you've got to try and understand why they felt they needed to do this. And if somebody mad, somebody with, you know, diminished responsibility, then you've got to kind of... Well, I mean, obviously as a cop, it's not your place to, but as a society, we need to balance how much responsibility this person had for the consequences of their actions. And I think that in life, we need to remember, because as you know, I stopped being Christian a long time ago and became pagan. And the main reason I did that was because paganism doesn't have any opportunity to say sorry later. You know, whatever you do has an immediate consequence, and that consequence ripples out from you like throwing a stone into a lake. And that focused me on realizing that when I deal with anything and anybody, how I do that is as important as what I do. How I do it is important. You know, being cruel to somebody, if you're dealing with somebody, say for example, I come back to being a supervisor again, if somebody hasn't done something they should do, and I have to discuss that with them, the most important thing for me was always, am I telling them this for their benefit, so that they don't make that mistake again and improve their quality of their work and also their happiness within the job? Or am I having a go at them because I just want to vent? Because if it's I want to vent, no, stop, because that's not going to help anybody. It's just me. Meh. They haven't benefited from it. I've made them feel worse. If they've done something willful, address that element of it. If they've made a mistake, address that element of it. And I kind of carried that I tried to carry that forward in my life because of this fact that there is no repenting later on. I'm not criticising anyone's religion.
Yeah, of course.
You do you.
Sure.
But for me, having been brought up in that religion, for me, it got to the stage where I just felt it didn't resonate with me anymore. Whereas paganism did not, and you know, as soon as you tell somebody pagan, oh, you dance around fires naked and I do. No, you don't. But it's all about the balance of life. That's the whole purpose.
So you're not necessarily atheist. You just have some different outlook on...
I think the thing is, paganism is not... It's a duotheisic religion, which means that you have two deities. You have a male deity and a female deity, Gaia and Cunninus, and that each one of them represents something which is always in balance. But for me, I look at it more of a philosophy, and it kind of came back to when I was really unwell. I was really mentally unwell, and we lived in a little village, and we would go to the church that was there, and I'd done a lot of work I produced a Christmas album for the church to pay for some renovations, and the vicar, Alex, lovely guy, but he came round obviously to check on me, make sure I was okay, and we ended up getting into this deep conversation. And as I said to you before, my big problem was I felt so much self-loathing, so much hatred for myself because of things I'd done in the past, or my perception of things I'd done in the past. That was my biggest problem. I detested myself, and I genuinely detested myself. I had at that point in my life, I had no love for myself at all. And I was saying, and he was trying to be supportive, and I said, look, the problem is, Alex, you know, I've done too many things. I've been, there's no way back from this. The scales have tipped too far away. And he said, no, anyone can say sorry and be forgiven. And I remember coming up with the classic, so telling me that if Hitler repented on his deathbed, he'd be allowed in heaven. And he said, well, if you genuinely meant it, then yes. And for me, that was just a switch being flicked, and I just thought, I can't accept that. I think, you know, it's too, for me, and again, when I say, I am genuinely not raining on anyone's parade with this.
Yeah.
But for me, I thought, I can't be doing this anymore. You know, and I then realised that I needed to have something which put the weight on me as a person to be better, because I had been an arsehole. Remember we discussed before about me living with this girl in America and then kind of running away, and I was not a pleasant person. I was very, I mean, when I had my counselling, I look back on it, and it was basically because I was chasing fulfillment everywhere in my life, but I didn't care who I hurt in the process. And only when everything kind of collapsed in on me that I then reflected upon myself. Because every now and again the universe holds a mirror up to yourself. And I was sitting there feeling sorry for myself, because the thing that I love most, the thing, you know, my career, had been unfairly taken away from me by arseholes. And it kind of dawned on me as a bit of a crushing realisation that that's the person I'd been in my relationships up to that point, you know, and in my interactions with, not in work, but outside work, you know, I'd been the arsehole. And so how can I, you know, I'm so hypocritical, feeling sorry for myself when I'd kind of inflicted that kind of behaviour onto other people. And I think that was kind of one of the catalysts for me then reflecting upon this and then thinking, right, you know, my future's got to be where there is no saying sorry later. I mean, maybe there is, I don't know. But, you know, for me, I have to live my life in a way that my interactions with people, I've got to be mindful that I've got a choice. If I'm dealing with somebody, I can be selfish and cruel and thoughtless, or I can try and be supportive and kind. And, you know, if I do that, and somebody is given some comfort from that, then it's passed on. It ripples out. If I'm cruel and horrible to somebody, they go away feeling miserable and pissed off and unhappy. They probably take it out on the next person because they're feeling miserable, and it just goes on. And I think that in life, you know, this is what I'm saying about the good news and everything. You've got to try and give this positivity in your interactions with people, because if not, if you then complain about negativity, if you haven't given positivity, what right have you got to complain? It's all you're doing is reflecting this back, and I think that everything we do is kind of reflected back on us in a small way, which then becomes a big way. It's like, I think that you know that if there was something in your life that you wanted to talk about, you could pick the phone up, and I wouldn't go, oh, I can't talk at the moment, Cosmin, I'm you know, sort yourself out, da, da, da. I think, you know, I wouldn't be like that, because that's not the person I want to be, and you never know how far you've come. When I was the sergeant in a place called Abergavenny, there was a girl that had transferred up from another police station, WPC, and we were driving around one night, and I'm driving around, and this is the first time we'd kind of crewed up together and gone out. And every now and then I got the impression that she wanted to say something to me. And she was like about to say it, and then she's like, oh no, I can't. Probably because I was the sergeant as well, and you know, do I say this as a sergeant? Anyway, so in the end, I remember turning around to her and I said, look, Ange, what's on your mind? You want to say something, what is on your mind? And she went, oh, I used to fucking hate you. You were such a cunt. And I went, yeah, I was, and I'm sorry. And she, I can't believe how different you are now. And I thought, I was so happy with that. That was such a, you know, I took that as a I said, she goes, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I said, no, I take that as an absolutely enormous compliment. And you're absolutely right, I was an absolute dickhead, I was. And my collapse was so complete that it allowed me to, obviously, you know, without doubt, the main reason that I kind of rebuilt myself a bit better was because of being with Amanda, you know, being with somebody like her who you know, maybe people say maybe a better person, but yeah, she did absolutely make me a better person. And you know, I totally accept that. And and I have to bear the responsibility of every little piece of harm I've caused in the past. But I have apologised to people. I have sort of tracked people down and apologised to them. But the thing is that there comes a point where you have to realise you can't change the past. The only thing I can do to kind of redress that balance and stop the guilt is to genuinely not be like that again, to have learned from that experience and not be like that again.
That's the corny answer, but it's so right, isn't
I think it is. I think,
what else can you do?
Well, I've got friends who seem to live their life in like a loop of like car crash lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Not because they're horrible people, but just because they constantly make the same decisions. Yeah. And I think, once is a mistake, twice is a mistake. You do it 3 times, it's a conscious decision.
If you keep carrying gold bricks, you'll keep building the same house.
Exactly, yeah.
I heard that somewhere, and it just...
No, I like that.
I've always kept it in mind,
I like that, and it is. And an analogy I've often given with people when it comes to mental health is having poor mental health. When you are in a position to be able to do something about it, is like being in the middle of the ocean, treading water, holding on to 2 bags of gold. You think that this is valuable, that you're holding on to, you can't let go of it. You think that you need to have it. You think that it's going to be of benefit to you in the future, but it's dragging you under.
Ocean. What's the value of gold in the middle of nothing?
But this is the rub. What is the value of what you're holding on to compared with what you're going to lose? And you can keep your head above water, and then the rescue ship turns up, and you've got to reach out and grab the side of that rescue ship. You can't reach out because you're holding on to this gold. And so you've got people go, let go of the gold. No, I can't let go of the gold. This is, it's valuable. But you're going to drown. No, I don't. But you're going to drown. No, I'm going to hang on to this. And I think that, I was very much like that. I was very much treading water, holding on to this gold for, that orange thing in, please, for a lot of my life. And it's only really in later life I've understood that you can always get gold. You can always accumulate gold. Okay? But you can never tread water forever. What are you doing? You hungry? Yeah, he's hungry.
Fat cat.
He's not fat. He's just big boned. What are you doing? Wow. So that's a bit of a depressing one, wasn't it?
No, I'm really happy. That's a very important conversation in my mind.
Oh.
At least it's something I didn't know about you.
Really?
Yeah, I would have never guessed.
Ooh, which bit?
The part where you wanted to kill yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why I'm very open about my mental health problems that I had in my life. And we said before about my upbringing. That voice always still resonates in the back of my head. So part and parcel of the point when I was thinking of killing myself is when my grandmother was right. I'm not worth anything. And so that had an impact on me then as well.
I guess we have a third guest. You want to see something?
Yeah, he wants to come and get involved in it. No, so yeah, I would love for anyone, if they watch this, if they're struggling, because all trauma hates exposure. I've always felt that mental health is a little bit like being in a domestically abusive relationship with your mind. That your mind is saying to you, don't tell anyone, they won't understand. They'll look down on you. I'm the only one that can look after you. Stay with me. Because you're not worth anything, nobody else will want you. And I kind of felt my mind did that to me. That my mind was my own worst enemy. And so for me, saying to people, look, I'm really happy in my life. There is light at the end of the tunnel. I remember the reason, when it comes to the suicide thing, I can't remember where I read this, but it resonated with me, and it's like, you can always do it tomorrow. let's just see how today turns out. Let's get through. Maybe something good will happen today. You can always kill yourself tomorrow. It doesn't matter, does it?
You don't have anything left to lose anymore.
Exactly.
You only have something to gain.
And that kind of like is one of those things. It's like chug along for an extra couple of days, and just push yourself forward. But of course, I had the girls and I had Mandy, so that was the thing that because there's two kinds of thing. One is where you have suicidal ideation, where you think about it, and then when it becomes serious is when you start preparing. And I never got to the stage where I started preparing. But I remember there's a boy I worked with many years ago, a guy called Kevin. Really funny guy, really nice guy. And this was in that company Thailand that I worked with. And when I left, I never saw him again. But I heard a few years later, because he left not long after that, and he went into, I think he became an electrician or something. And he'd started going out with this girl. And their relationship had ended, and he killed himself because he couldn't handle the fact that the relationship had ended. And I've always kind of thought, if he'd held on, the pain wouldn't have lasted forever. It wouldn't, because it doesn't. It dulls. If he'd held on, eventually he would have had that spark of joy. Eventually, I'm sure. And somebody once said suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And I kind of hang on to that one as well. It's a permanent solution to a temporary situation. You won't always... There's very few things that we would ever encounter that we can't recover from emotionally. But we have to give ourselves time to do that. And I'm just so glad that I was fortunate enough to be in a position where I had Amanda and where I met Helen, the counsellor, and that they were both a lighthouse to me when I was bobbing around holding on to 2 bags of gold in the middle of a dark ocean, and they gave me the ability to let go of those bags of gold and start swimming towards the shore. And I always feel so sad that there are people who I can't ever just kind of go, right, okay, feel how this is now in comparison with what I was then. This is, I know how you feel now because I felt that. I have a little bit of this feeling from me to know
how
that you
it
can
is
get
on
there.
the other side.
Yeah. And you see things, people who kill themselves. Like I remember reading about Keith Flint from The Prodigy, who killed himself because his relationship ended. And I just think it's just so sad. It's just, if you just held on for a bit, you would have been okay eventually. Yeah, okay, you're not going to ever kind of like, I don't care. You're never going to do that.
It's going to suck. But...
Yeah, of course it's going to suck. But that's the nature of life, isn't it? We've all got things that we look back on. I look back on certain things in my life and I'm like, yes, oh my God, really? But I know I can't change that. The guilt I feel for certain things I've done in my life, the wishing I could have done things differently. But I realised, because when I told you I spoke to some people, I said, I'm really sorry for the person I was, and they went, look, with all due respect, I forgot about that a long time ago. So I'm carrying this around, thinking, oh my God, I hurt them so badly. Oh, I'm a terrible person. And they're like, I don't even really remember that now. I kind of, my life's moved on. So I'm creating this problem where it doesn't even exist in my mind, because this guilt is there going.
Yeah, we tend to kind of see other people in their exteriors and kind of imagine how they would feel on the things that we've done, all these kinds of other things, but at the same time you cannot see their own interior life and struggles and whatever their thoughts, and you can see yours, and that's the part that sucks, because you see yourself and you see all the horrible things in yourself and the regrets that you have and the shame and the guilt, and you're like, oh my God, these people, they must be feeling that as well. But
yeah, and it's almost like a bit of an ego thing, isn't it? You think, I know I've affected them so badly, and they go, who are you? It's like, I'm the one that destroyed you and broke your heart. And I went, what's your name again? Okay, it's not quite that extreme, but that's the thing is, the thing that you think that you've caused so much heartache with, that these people are carrying around, and you need to apologise for that they let that go a long time ago. It's only you that's really got that bouncing around inside your head. But mental health for me, I mean, as you know, Amanda, the stuff that she's done for mental health, the fact that she's the only person in the police service to ever receive the Queen's Police Medal for services to mental health in policing. Incredible what she did. I'm just so lucky. And we're back again to this thing that I said at the very beginning, where in my life, everything in my life that has been successful is just blind bloody luck. I'm just lucky that I met Amanda and she wanted to go out with me. I'm lucky that I met Helen, my counsellor, at the right time. I'm lucky. So whenever I'm feeling a little bit grumpy, like, the world's against me, I really do have to kind of take myself off and have a word with myself. I just think how many times that the world's gone bonus to me, and I've just gone, you've got to take the rough with the smooth. Life is about balance. Being a pagan is all about balance. The fact that if something goes against me, that there's something which has not gone the way I want it to go, I've got to remember that there's been so many times when it's, and to be honest with you, even though it is about balance, on the balance, I've been much luckier than I've been unlucky. Much luckier than I've been unlucky. And the trick is to people to count your blessings. I don't think it's quite the way it should be. It's that always know that when you're feeling upset about something, and it's all you can focus on is this negative thing. 9 times out of 10, if somebody came along to you and said, and gave you a real bad news, you'd forget about that. You'd never think of that again. That would never bother you again. We spend so much time in our lives fretting over little rain showers.
Yes, we do.
Yeah,
speaking from experience.
But it's only when the hurricane turns up that you realise how in the scheme of things, how not unimportant. That's not right. But just how the weight that we should have attached to them. If you get rained on a little bit, that's not the end of the world. If a tornado turns up, that is. And sometimes we look at rain showers as being tornadoes, and we shouldn't. We should look at them as being what they are. Easier said than done when you're in the middle of it. But
to be kept in mind.
Try to keep it in mind. I mean, there is no magic bullet. There's no magic wand. I've always wished I could take people's pain away. I've always wished I could. If somebody comes to you with bad news or sadness, I've always wished I could do something that would be, that would sponge away the acuteness of how they feel. Not take away what they feel, because they that's part of what's going to make them what they are. But that sharpness of that pain, just to dull that a little bit. But generally speaking, all you really can do is just say, well, I'm here. I know what you're feeling. This won't last forever. I've been there in my own way. We share more similarities than differences in this. You'll be okay. You'll be okay. You just got to hold on. And I think that's it. Just hold on. Because
if you had to give a message around to people who are right now going through a really messy situation and they don't really see.
Right. First of all, hold on. Like I just said, talk to somebody. Trauma hates exposure. Find the right person to talk to. It's not the person who's going to say, right, you need to do this, and this. It's not what you need sometimes. Sometimes you just need somebody to go, okay, tell me about it. I'll listen. If you want advice, I'll give you advice. If not, then I'm just going to be the person you can turn up and talk to. But hold on. That's really the thing, is that in almost everything, I promise you that the way you feel now will not be the way you will feel in a year or 6 months or 3 months, and certainly not in 5, 10. I vividly remember the heartbreaks I've had. I vividly remember having a girl who cheated on me and finding out. And I remember what it felt like, that gut-twisting feeling of inadequacy and betrayal. And I look back on it now and I'm like, but at the time it was like everything, you know. And it was for quite a little while afterwards. It was good in some respects, because obviously being in a band, fabulous material for writing songs. But you know, I look on it now, and I mean, a great example, I think, probably to finish this off, a great example would be that superintendent, the one that willfully went out of his way to destroy my career. I had a conversation with, when I had the therapy and everything, I came out the other end of this, I told you, like, for a couple of years I kept talking about it all the time. And in the end, I realised that I needed to forgive him. Well, no, people, because I had the conversation with somebody who'd also been wronged by him, and it was a guy called Dick, and I said about it, I said, I forgive him, Dick, and he went, you what? And he was like purple, going, when I retire, I'm going to hunt him down and fucking kill him. And I said, all right, have a little look at this situation. He is a horrible bastard, yeah? And he went, yeah. I said, if he knew that every day you wake up angry and pissed off and bitter because of what he did, how do you think that would make him feel?
Oh,
he'd love it. He'd love it.
All for it.
Yeah. So the bottom line is, he is an idiot, a horrible, hollow man that can only make himself feel better by making other people feel worse. Okay? So he is not a strong man. He's not a great man. He's pathetic. Now, he either doesn't know what he's doing because he's stupid, or he does know what he's doing because he's cruel. But either way, I absolutely refuse to give him any more power over me than I already have.
Satisfaction.
And so I forgive him. Not because I like him, but at the end of the day, I have to say this. That was probably one of the worst moments in my life, when all that happened and my brain collapsed and all that. It was also, without doubt, the most positive thing that ever happened to me. Because that stopped me being that person that female officer remembered me being. It made me reevaluate myself. It made me look at myself and made me realise I was not a good person before. The universe held a mirror up to me, and fortunately I had the ability at that time to look into it and recognise in there I needed to change. I needed to be better. I needed to be the kind of person I couldn't complain about, because I was no better. I was an arsehole. I was stupid and thoughtless and cruel and selfish, and I'm complaining about somebody who was stupid and thoughtless and selfish and cruel. You know, hypocritical. So yeah, okay, what he did was horrific, but that was probably the single catalyst that allowed me to have the wonderful life I've got now. So he did me a favour, and the best thing about it was, if I ever bumped into him again, I would shake his hand and tell him that, because it's true, and secondly, it would piss him off so much. And it would be a little bit of
closure.
Yeah, a little bit of closure. You know, it's how you look at something, isn't it? It's how you frame the situation that you're in.
Perspective matters so much.
Of course it does.
I always think about that.
Yeah, and it does. It really does. Perspective really does matter. And it's the effort you put into that perspective as a human being as well. And you kind of really do have to sometimes, and I use this expression often, is like, I take myself off and have a word with myself. I speak out loud to myself all the time. All the time.
Me too.
Yeah, all the time. I have lengthy conversations with myself.
Hell yeah.
And refer to myself in third party, third person when I'm talking to myself. And so the advice I would give somebody is hold on. The things that seem so absolutely negative now can very, very, very often be the things that in the future you look back and you think, that was the best thing that could have happened in hindsight. A relationship ends. and you think, oh, it's terrible. I wish I was with that person. I feel bad that I'm not with that person. And then you meet somebody else, and that other person is so much better for you that you would never have got into a relationship with if you'd stayed in that relationship with somebody else. Things like that happen, or you miss an opportunity because of it. Perspective is everything. But of course, experience is that thing we get half an hour after we need it. And it's the same with perspective. I can say all these things, and I could tell anybody these things, but until you've experienced it for yourself, it's just hollow words. It's only after you go, oh yeah, that was good advice. Yeah, okay, it was, but I can't make you feel that. You have. This is why my advice is hold on.
Yeah, hold on, and to some extent try to control your emotions and yourself, and try to just really believe the things that somebody tells you when they tells you that it's going to get better and you're going to look back on it's going to be fine,
Yeah, hold on.
Just to try and actually, instill that on yourself instead of just waiting for time to pass and then, out of nowhere being like, oh wow, I just realized that it's better now. No, you didn't just realize that it was always going to be like this, and so many people have told you this, and if you just had a bit of trust in yourself and them, then it would have been easier.
Yeah.
In time.
I mean, I don't believe in fate, and the expression "things happen for a reason." I think that should be couched as there's a reason for what happened, for the things that happen. I don't think there's some kind of divine, and I'd hate there to be if when my future's written already. I'd hate that, but I think that what happens is when you look back at where you are now, you can see the consequence of everything that leads up to it. Whether it be like the car crash of your life up to that point, and then suddenly you realise you've come away from this with a different perspective. I look at my situation with this is I come away from this now knowing myself a bit better. It putting me in a position where my attitude towards my place in the world is I think is healthier than it was. But I had to. It's the Shawshank Redemption. Have any of you ever seen that movie?
I have not.
Okay.
I've heard it's very good, but I have not.
It's the bit at the end. Okay. Now this guy's dug a hole to get out of jail, and he's been in there for years and years and years. But the place he digs it to is the sewer pipe, and he has to crawl through the sewer pipe to escape. And the thing says, and Andy McFrain crawled through a quarter of a mile of other people's shit to emerge the cleanest he had ever been. Because it's raining when he comes out and he stands there in the rain like this, wash cleaner, all this shit. And sometimes that's the case. Sometimes you've got to drop, you've got to, you're in prison, and it's a prison that we often make for ourselves. And sometimes the only way you're going to get out of that prison is to crawl through the shit pipe, to emerge into the cleansing rain on the other side. But when you're in the middle of the shit pipe, you're only hoping that there's something better on the other end. And sometimes the shit pipe's a bit longer than at other times. But I think that generally in life, if we look back on the things that have hurt us, most of the time, I think we then see that then we end up on a slightly better place.
You gain something from that.
Yeah. Even if it's I'm not going to do that again, or I'm not going to make that same mistake again, or something like that. I think generally speaking, most people, if they are open to it, then any of the bad things that happen in life are the stepping stones up towards something better, rather than stepping stones down to something worse. But that's the perspective thing that you were talking about. That's why you've got to have a look at that perspective. And sometimes not everything's for everybody, but hold on, something better could be around the corner. If you give up now, you'll never know. All you're ever going to do is move on to the next world with the pain that you've got now. If you hold on,
you'd be surprised.
Yeah. One more story. Literally one more story.
No problem.
It was when I used to work in Chepstow, we were very near to the second Severn crossing, which is the bridge that goes across the River Severn. Now, River Severn is a huge river. It's the second highest tidal flow river in the world. So when the water comes in and goes out, it's not good. Big suicide spot. People chucking themselves off the bridge. there was this guy, and I remember he was always, he was an absolute nightmare. He was always he was in this really shit relationship. Couldn't live with her, couldn't live without her. Every time she was all right in fairness. It was him. He was just a bit of a dick. A bit of a drinker as well. And every time she tried to finish it with him, he threatened suicide, blah, blah, blah. So this call came in, he's done it again. So I thought, right, okay, I'm going to get down to, there's an area where you can park to get up onto the bridge. I know where he's going to go. He's going to go, oh, if you don't come back to me, I'm going to kill myself. Because that's kind of how he was. He was one of these people who, anyway, so I get down there, and literally, as I'm driving in there, he's pulling up in his car, and he's drunk. So he's drink driving, okay? So I get him out, get him in the car. Should have locked him up for drink driving, okay? We end up having this 2-hour conversation where we're discussing this. If you go up on the bridge and you say, I'm going to kill myself if you can come back to me, and she comes back to you, why is she coming back to you? It's not because she loves you, it's because she's trying to stop you from doing something. She cares about you, but she doesn't want to be with you. And we had this long conversation, and I said, look, I should be locking you up now. If I do, you're going to lose your job as well, because you're a driver. And that's going to be another thing which is going to be a reason to take you up onto the bridge. So after a couple of hours, where he's pouring his heart out and telling me all these things, and I'm listening to him, we're talking about it, and I'm trying to give him some perspective. Mm-hmm. So I said, right, I'm not going to lock you up. I'm going to take you to your mum's, because his mum lived there as well. I said, and I'm having your keys. You're going to give me your keys, and you can come in and get your keys off me tomorrow. Shouldn't have done it. My duty was to arrest him, lock him up, blah, blah, blah. However, I was using my discretion. I didn't think it was the right thing to do at the time. I think if I'd done that, that would have been the end of him. Anyway, I never saw him again. We didn't have any more calls. Mm-hmm. Probably 5 years later, I was wandering through Chepstow on patrol, foot patrol, and a guy comes running up to me, and he runs up to me, and he went, "Oh my God, it's you!" And I was like, "Who are you?" And I said, "Do I know you?" And he said, "Da, da, da, da." I went, "Oh my God, yeah." I said, "So it is." Looked completely different, and he said, "Look, can I give you a hug?" And I went, "Yeah, go on." It's obviously a bit odd hugging a policeman in uniform in the middle of a busy high street, but he said, "Look," he said, "that day," he said, "you changed my life." He said, if you'd locked me out, I'd have killed myself." He said, "I got out of that relationship. I've been sober for 5 years." He said, "I'm now engaged. I've got a child on the way." He said, "And none of this would have happened if it wasn't for you." I said, "It wasn't for me, mate. It was for you. You changed your life, not me. I just happened to make a decision." He said, "If you'd locked me up and I'd lost my job, that would have been the end of me. I'd have killed myself." He said, I'm sure of that." He said, "That conversation we had," he said, because it was a direct conversation. I wasn't giving him platitudes or stuff. I've been quite direct with him.
I guess you were also tired of everything. You're like, come on.
I wasn't. I was still a police officer. I wasn't a counsellor. But I was. I was trying to show him a different. And he said, and that resonated with me. And when you took me home and you took a chance on me, a complete stranger, he said, because I know I was a pain in the ass to you all. He said, you could easily just lock me up. You'd have done your job, and that would have been the end of it. He said, but because of that
one act of kindness, you can open people's eyes.
And it was fabulous to see that, because obviously, I could have done it and never known the effect that I had. I just never saw him again. Just think maybe he's just knocked it on the head. But that is the epitome of hold on, isn't it? That's his life was. He said, "My life is so much better now." He said, "I'm in a really healthy relationship. This lovely girl, she, there's not toxic anymore. There's not arguments. Got this child on the way. My job is great now. And that's it. That's why hold on, because his life didn't suddenly get better after I took him back to his mum's that day. He had to crawl through the shit pipe, didn't he? But on the other end of it was the cleansing rain, And on the other end of it was this life, which was now so much better than what he thought he needed. You know, when he was in that relationship, he thought, I have to have this. Nothing else will be as good. Nothing else can fulfill me the way this relationship did. But it's only when he was on the other end of the shit pipe and he looked back that he then realised, no, that was toxic. That was no good. I was no good. That was no good. And now I'm in this relationship where I am actually happy, not just telling myself I'm being happy. You know, I now have what I need as well as what I want. And I think that's a great example of the hold on. You know, I did nothing other than make a decision on a day. He did all of the hard work. He did all of the changing. He did all of the difficult stuff, crawling through the shit pipe. He did all of that, but he held on, and because of that, his life was what it should have been. You know, you got the life that he deserved to have. And I think that would be my message to anybody. That story, it's a genuine story. It's not like one of my many made-up stories I used to tell people to try and emphasise the point. That's a genuine story. And he could not have envisaged that when we were having a conversation in the car, he could not envisage his life not being with that girl. That nothing else would ever fulfill him. Nothing else would ever matter. Nothing else would be the same. That's the only thing that he had to have. He couldn't ever live without her. But of course he could, and he did, and his life was better by living without her once he'd crawled through the shit pipe. So yeah, hold on, crawl through the shit pipe.
That's a beautiful story. Actually.
Beautiful story, crawl through the shit pipe.
No, I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah,
that's an actual real example. You know, it's not just you'll feel better. You know, and you know it's an actual concrete example and.
Yeah, I mean,
it's always beautiful to hear those things.
But it could easily have been, if I had bumped into that day, I'd never have known. But I'm just so glad I did. And I've got to say that probably it is kind of up there in all of the things you do as a cop. The things that matter to you are usually the things that aren't probably the things that most people would think. That meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to me because I got to be honest, I did shit myself a little bit afterwards that I should have locked him up. I thought, oh my God, this is going to blow back in my face. Mm-hmm. How is this going to play out if somebody goes, why didn't you arrest? And I did get it. Why didn't you arrest him? And it's like, oh, I didn't see him driving. You know, no, I didn't say that. But you know, I just said, look, it is what it is. And in fairness, again, back in the day, I had a sergeant that went, okay, but don't do it again. You know,
that's good leadership. Yeah.
All right. You had your decision. You know, you had your reasons for this, but you know, don't make a habit of this. Letting people go.
The good Samaritan cop.
No, just a sensible bloke. You know, he was just a decent, you know, old school, decent guy. Discretion is probably one of the biggest things that police officers have. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should be doing something. And I think, you know, that having support from your supervisors to say, yeah, I trust your judgment, I think is really important. There we are. But I think we better leave it there then for the night.
Yeah, it's pretty good, I would say.
Cool.
Thank you very much for sharing more of
my nonsense.
No, it's beautiful, man. I really think so, and I'm always glad and I'm happy that frankly, I don't know how many people will watch this, but you know, I'm always happy if at least one person sees it and just looks at it and is like, "Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's really nice."
Well,
you know, and
you know, you got to put it out there, haven't you? You know, ultimately, if you put it out there and one person benefits from it, then that's a result, isn't it? So, and I know, it's always kind of nice to see that. Not everybody's got their shit together all the time, isn't it? That we all have a little wobble from time to time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you very much.
Coolio. Oh, my dog's asleep.